Good afternoon and welcome to the Santa Rosa City Council's October 11th session. Madam Clerk, could you announce the roll, please?
Let the record show that all council members are present.
Thank you. We had no study sessions. Madam City Attorney, could you announce the closed session, please?
There's no report from the closed sessions.
Thank you very much. Moving on to proclamations and presentations. Our first proclamation is on National Disability Awareness Month, and Mr. Corsi has this. And who's coming down to receive it? Wonderful. Eileen?
Eileen Allen.
Wonderful. Welcome. Mr. Corsi.
Eileen, I'll read this and then feel free to make a few comments when I'm finished.
Thank you.
Whereas October is National Disability Awareness Month, and the City of Santa Rosa strives for all of our citizens to have the opportunity to live and work with dignity and freedom, and whereas the City of Santa Rosa, along with cities, towns, counties, and states across the nation, seeks to promote the full participation of the more than 50 million American children and adults with disabilities, over 16% of the population in the state of California. And whereas the Sonoma County Mayor's Committee on Employment of People with Disabilities helps to encourage and promote the gainful employment of people with disabilities with the support of nonprofit organizations such as Disability Service and Legal Center, Redwood Empire Industries, Oaks of Hebron, Department of Rehabilitation, North Bay Regional Center, and many other organizations. And whereas during National Disability Awareness Month, we recognize the indispensable contributions of people with disabilities. We recognize that make in our economy and our daily lives and recommit to building a community where each of us can realize the full extent of our dreams. And whereas the City of Santa Rosa has participated during October in the DSLC Tech Expo and will participate in the Sonoma County Mayor's Committee on the Employment of Persons with Disabilities Awards Breakfast. Now, therefore, be it resolved that John Sawyer, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, urge all of our residents to recognize October as National Disability Awareness Month.
I just want to thank the City Council for supporting the Mayor's Committee. Mayor's Committees traditionally Mayor's Committees on Employment for People with Disability have grown from like back in World War II when veterans were coming back from the war. They supported employment for those veterans. And now we include everybody with disabilities. And in our city and in our county, this breakfast represents how much we honor the people and our businesses who hire people with disabilities, as well as create policy that makes it possible for people with disabilities to work. And this breakfast awards 10 or 11 folks every year. We've given over 99 awards in our history. We started in 1982, and our formal breakfast started 13 years ago. And we've had many people come and give awards to our wonderful folks in this community who have worked very hard to give inroads for folks with disabilities. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And see you there.
Next, we have a proclamation on Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Ms. Carlstrom has this. And who's coming down?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Come on down.
I am informed that the recipient is Madeline O'Connell, although I think you've brought some friends.
I brought a whole bunch of friends.
Would you prefer that I read this first and then you can introduce us, or
Sure, you go
want
right
to take
ahead.
the lead?
Oh, no, you go right ahead.
Okay. I think for the third year in a row, I am proud to present a proclamation from the City of Santa Rosa, which reads, Whereas the City of Santa Rosa recognizes that domestic violence affects 1 in 4 families in our local community. in that the crime of domestic violence violates an individual's privacy, dignity, and security based on the systematic use of emotional, physical, sexual, psychological, and economic control or abuse. And whereas the YWCA Sonoma County is a community-based, not-for-profit organization affiliated with the YWCA USA, YWCA Sonoma County embodies its mission to empower, educate, and advocate for domestic violence survivors and their children who find they are unsafe in their own homes. YWCA Sonoma County operates our community's only confidential safe house shelter, the only 24/7 domestic violence crisis hotline, and the only therapeutic preschool serving one of our most vulnerable populations, children ages 3 to 5 years old. And whereas domestic violence is a serious crime that affects people of all races, sexes, ages, sexual orientations, and income levels, stopping the cycle of vicious criminal assault in the home requires a coordinated effort between the criminal justice system and the agencies that provide services to victims, primarily reliant on the strong resolve and immense courage of survivors. And whereas only a collaborative community effort will put an end to the cycle of domestic violence, members of our community are encouraged to eliminate domestic violence in Sonoma County through awareness, education, and empowerment. Now therefore be it resolved that John Sawyer, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, does hereby proclaim October 2016 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
On behalf of the YWCA's Board of Directors, volunteers, and staff, and mostly the participants in our programs, it really is our honor to be acknowledged by Santa Rosa City Council and, of course, Honorable Mayor John Sawyer. It's interesting about a community as small and tightly knit as Santa Rosa or Sonoma County that tonight in our audience we have a founder of the YWCA Sonoma County. Now you got me doing it. YWCA Sonoma County, Pat Kuda, and I just want to honor her and mention to her our grateful thanks for bringing YWCA to Sonoma County back in 1975. How about a round of applause for that? Aaron mentioned that I'm surrounded by a few friends, and boy, am I grateful for it. I'm really proud to represent the advocates and the navigators of the YWCA, and these are the ladies behind me. These are the heroes of the YWCA. I am merely the spokesperson. And we're here partnering with our very strong representatives from Santa Rosa Police Department. We talked about this a year or so ago, and I'm really happy to say that our partnership grows ever stronger, day by day, call by call, in something that we call the Domestic Violence Response Team, or DVERT as it is known. And we have received additional funding for multiple years, and so this partnership is going strong, and I'm very grateful to Santa Rosa Police Department for being here with me too. Yes, round of applause. Absolutely. You know, according to the CDC, on average, 20 people per minute are victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in the United States. And over the course of the year, that equals more than 10 million women and men. It's really startling to realize that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience domestic violence in their lives. And I just want to pause on that statistic for a minute, because when I think about the 1 in 4 women, I know that that is associated to 1 in 4 families, and that's about 25% of the people that we all know in this room, in our community, and in the greater population. You don't have to be personally affected by domestic violence to understand that it is a public crisis. So a proclamation like yours, in which you share with everyone what we do to combat that, is really important to us. Of course, it is our shelter, our 27-bed, 7-bedroom shelter in a confidential location. With our 24/7 crisis hotline, earlier this evening I was asked for that phone number as I was greeting some of your guests, who, by the way, are all very kindly wearing the purple ribbon, which again is the symbol for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I'm grateful for that. You know that we have a preschool, and that's where we take care of at-risk children who have experienced violence in their homes, and the thing that makes us unique is we provide therapy to those little ones, and we're really effective at creating change in their lives. And recently we were able to invest in our aftercare program, which we call Encore. So that maybe there was a first chapter to your life, and maybe it involved violence. Maybe it's time to have your encore. So we're really proud to be supplementing those aftercare services. I gave everybody a calendar for October. Never a dull moment, right? We're a little busy in October, and we're proud to have the support of Kaiser Permanente funding a very important movie that we'll be screening. It's on the back of the flyer that I gave you with the calendar. It's called Audrey and Daisy, and it's a very impactful film that debuted at Sundance. We've told the Roxy Theater that we can fill a 300-seat theater, so we'd love it if all of you would come and bring 2 or 3 friends. This is a very impactful movie about what happens in the lives of teenagers when social media is used to broadcast activities, and I'm sure you can fill in the rest. We'd love to see you come to that with us. Tonight, we'll be at Mary's Pizza for a dine and donate, and you might be here a little later, but I know that they're open late, so you can even take it home with you. And last but not least, today I just want to ask each person in this audience if you would help YWCA spread the word about our mission and what it is that we do here. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any kind of social media is a very powerful marketing tool, but so is word of mouth. And so if you would leave here tonight and let everybody know that you met the YWCA and that we're the ones ending domestic violence in Sonoma County, we'd be very appreciative. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you for your work of the entire team.
My pleasure.
We have no staff briefings this afternoon. Mr. City Manager, anything to report?
Yes. The first, I would like to announce that the splash pad was open last weekend. We had lots of families turn out. It was a spectacular weekend. Unfortunately, it only runs till the end of the month because it gets retired in the winter weather, and it doesn't look like the weather's going to cooperate this weekend on the splash pad. But it was a good kickoff. Really exciting to see the families out and about this weekend. And we look forward to it really coming into usage next year. Additionally, over 150 people attended the second Southeast Greenway Community Workshop on Saturday to provide input about future land uses for the 57-acre site. Meeting participants were very engaged, and city staff and consultants received useful comments. A survey has been launched to allow people who weren't able to attend the workshop to provide their feedback on the project. The survey can be found at plantthegreenway, all one word, .com. We'll be bringing the Southeast Greenway project for a joint study session with Council and the Planning Commission on November 1st. And lastly, Supervising Engineer Steve Dittmer was selected to receive the Infrastructure Champion Lifetime Award of the Year, say that again, by the American Council of Engineering Companies North Coast Chapter. So we'd really like to congratulate Steve on that honor. The award honors an individual who has made significant contributions toward the development of critical community infrastructure. The award was presented at the chapter's annual Achievement Awards reception. The keynote speaker was Assemblymember Jim Wood, and it was held at the DeTurk Round Barn on Thursday, October 6th. So once again, thank you to Steve. He's really working hard. He's heading up the project at Courthouse Square, and he knows that this was a well-deserved award, and I'll send you all some pictures later. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney.
I have no report.
All right, thank you. Statements of abstention. Council members? Well, I will be abstaining and leaving the chamber at 14.1. There are no decisions to be made, that there are discussions that will ensue, so I will be leaving the chamber when we start to address 14.1. Moving on to mayors and council members' reports. Who would like to start? Any reports? Mr. Oliveras.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, also want to remind the public that October is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I encourage both men and women not to forego any regular examinations. And once again, as in past years, I had the opportunity to participate in Sutter Hospital's Can't Walk for a Cure this past Friday. And I want to applaud their efforts and also the efforts of our other major hospitals, Kaiser Memorial, who provide a lot of resources and treatment for that terrible disease.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wysocki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to report that I chaired the meeting of City Council's Downtown Subcommittee this morning. Good solid turnout. The concern is still being expressed regarding homelessness and transients in our downtown. One item that was brought up for discussion as we move forward with some of our work on ordinances for the park is an ordinance for storage of private property on public planters, if you will. That would allow us some flexibility to not make our downtown a storage space. And the other items, I think, will dovetail nicely into item 14.2. I'll wait until then.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other reports, council? Mr. Corsi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, along with other council members and staff, I attended the League of California Cities Conference in Long Beach. Had an opportunity to go to a number of different sessions, educational sessions about various topics, but one that I did want to highlight in this report was about government engaging youth. And it made me think about all the young people who come to our meetings on Tuesday night and how we might make this a more enriching opportunity for you, not just on Tuesdays, but in other ways. And I will be having further conversations with staff about that. Yesterday was the monthly meeting of the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the new round of Plan Bay Area, and we have a report from our own staff on tonight's agenda for that. So I'll just say that the comments that we as SCTA have on the draft plan are very similar to the comments that are being suggested by city staff. We're on the same page with that. The other concern that comes out of the Plan Bay Area update for me particularly is looking at, while this plan goes to 2040 and it does a great job of reducing greenhouse gas emissions over the next 24 years in the Bay Area. But what it doesn't do is what I think we need to do in conjunction with reducing greenhouse gases, and that's reducing the cost of housing. Unfortunately, while this plan predicts a significant drop in greenhouse gases, it reflects a significant increase in the cost of housing to the average resident of the Bay Area. From an average of 54% of income going toward housing now to 67% of income going toward housing in 24 years. That's the wrong direction. We're going to need to deal with that on an individual cities basis, and I think that we have a good plan here to get that started, but I don't want it to be forgotten as just as important an opportunity or as just as important a responsibility for us as the GHG requirements. The last thing is, last month I mentioned that the Regional Climate Protection Authority is being sued by California River Watch. Our CPA is defending that suit. There will be a hearing in February on that, and I'll be sharing a letter with the staff that River Watch has written in relation to that, but is not necessarily part of the litigation. And that concludes my report.
Excellent, thank you very much. Any other reports, council? Ms. Carlstrom.
Mr. Mayor, it's not actually a report, but I will be needing to abstain on item 11.2. I was absent from the meeting and not able to view the record.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other reports, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, September 13th and September 20th. Any changes or recommendations for altering those as submitted? All right, seeing none, they'll be accepted as submitted. Moving on to consent, Mr. McGlynn.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ensure the clerk noted my abstention?
Oh, yes,
Thank you.
Item 12.1, motion, multiple purchase orders award replacement pumps for water department. Item 12.2, resolution, request to summarily vacate approximately 7,978 square feet of public easement for the property located at 170 Railroad Street. Item 12.3, resolution, annual approval of new master agreements and approval of updated master agreements to provide professional services. And that's consent calendar.
Thank you. Council, questions? No questions from the council. I have no cards on this. Do I, Madam City Clerk, on the consent? All right, thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd move consent item 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3, waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second, and your votes, please. And we have 7 ayes. Thank you very much. Moving on to our report item, and I will excuse myself.
Item 14.1, report, referendum petition challenging ordinance number 4072, Teresa Stricker, interim city attorney, and Daisy Gomez, city clerk, presenting.
Good afternoon. The staff is providing an update on the referendum petition that was filed recently challenging portions of the rent stabilization and other tenant protection ordinance. That ordinance was adopted by council on August 30th of this year. On September 26th, a petition was filed with the city clerk that challenges all provisions of the ordinance that I just mentioned, except for one. The petition does not challenge the provision in the ordinance that repealed both the 90-day moratorium on rent increases, which took effect on July 7th of this year, or the just cause eviction ordinance, which took effect on September 16th of this year. As a result, both of those earlier ordinances, the moratorium on rent increases and the prior just cause for eviction ordinance, have been repealed. The repeal date was September 30th. So as of that date, there are no, the protections that council had previously put into place are no longer effective in the city. Currently, the Registrar of Voters is undergoing a review of the petition process. Initially, the registrar did what is called a prima facie review of the petition, which essentially means on its face, and determined based on an on-its face look of the petition that the petition met the requirements in terms of the number of signatures. Next, the registrar has to do a determination of whether the petition contains a sufficient number of signatures of qualified voters. The Registrar of Voters is currently undertaking that process. In addition to delivering the petition, the city clerk also delivered to the Registrar of Voters the 151 letters the clerk had received prior to the petition's filing from individuals requesting to have their signatures removed from the petition. As I mentioned, the registrar is currently in the process of determining whether the petition contains a sufficient number of signatures from qualified voters. If the registrar determines that the petition is insufficient, meaning that it does not contain a sufficient number of signatures, the challenged portions of the ordinance will then take effect at the next city council meeting once the city clerk reports the registrar's determination. If, on the other hand, the registrar determines that the petition has a sufficient number of qualified voters' signatures, and therefore the petition is sufficient, the city council will then be in a position of having to decide whether to do one of two things. One option is the city council may decide to repeal the challenged portions of the ordinance. Alternatively, the council may decide to submit the issue to the voters. The council would then need to determine when the voters would be determining whether or not to vote in favor of the ordinance or against the ordinance. The choices would be to wait until the next city general election, which is 2 years from this November, so that would be November 2018, or to call a special election, and that special election can be called at one of the dates that the county will be holding a county general election. If the ordinance is submitted to the voters, the ordinance will not take effect unless and until the voters approve it. I'm happy to take any questions the council may have.
Thank you for your presentation. Council, questions? Chris?
Thank you. The initial look by the registrar at the signatures is a pool of 500 signatures. Is that correct?
No, the pool of 500 signatures will go to another issue, and I will get at that in a minute. The on its face is literally just looking at the face of the petition and counting signatures to see if there are a sufficient number of signatures on the face of the document. And there were a sufficient number.
All right.
The requirement, and I'm going to defer to the clerk for this, the actual numbers, but 8,000.
So the number was 8,484.
Was the required number of signatures to make the petition sufficient. And on its face, at least, there were 12,000.
520, put that on there.
I have it here, 12,524 signatures.
Right. Okay.
The 500 that you were referring to earlier relates to another step in the process. So once the registrar got beyond the looking at the petition on its face, the registrar then needs to do a random sampling to determine whether the signatures on the petition are signatures from valid city voters. And so as a part of that process, the registrar is required to do a random sampling and select randomly 500 signatures to verify. If, as a result of that random selection process and statistical analysis, which there's a procedure set forth for the registrar to do this, if the registrar determines that as a result of the statistical sampling that the valid number of signatures is less than 95% of the required 8,485 valid signatures, then the registrar will certify that the petition is insufficient, meaning it does not contain enough valid signatures. If instead the statistical sampling indicates that the number of valid signatures is greater than 110% of the required 8,485 valid signatures, then the registrar will certify that the petition is sufficient, meaning it has a sufficient number of valid signatures. If the statistical sampling indicates that the number of valid signatures is somewhere between the 85% mark and the 110% mark, then the registrar is required to do what is called a full check. And under a full check verification process, the registrar must verify every signature on the petition, at least up till the point till he or she determines that there are the required 8,485 signatures.
So my question has to do with that gray area between 95 and 110%. Given that the registrar has a limited amount of time to do all of this, the initial 500 needs to happen before those 30 days are up. Is it typical for the registrar to wait for the full period of 30 days to announce a finding, even if they have already decided it is either sufficient or insufficient before that 30 days is up?
Well, the 30 days are 30 business days. Just
yeah.
keep that, we should keep that in mind. It's not a 1-month period. It actually ends up being a bit longer than that. As I understand the practice, the registrar has quite a bit of work to do this time of year with the election coming up, but the registrar gets through the process as quickly as possible and reports out as soon as the registrar has an answer. That's my understanding of the registrar's process. So I don't think they necessarily take the full 30 days, but under the applicable state law, they have the 30 business days.
And I'm assuming we haven't heard anything from them to this point.
We have heard that they're doing their review and will be reporting to us as soon as possible.
Once we get that report, if the petition is found to be sufficient, what's the timeline for the council having to deal with our options, which are rescind or go to the voters?
As soon as we hear word from the registrar of voters, we would then be moving forward to put something on your agenda as quickly as possible. We do need to make sure that we are noticing things properly based on our internal policies about notification as well as under the Brown Act. But we would be bringing forward to you as quickly as possible the conclusions of the registrar to report out at an open public meeting. And if the determination is made by the registrar that the petition is sufficient, we would also be bringing forward to you, I think the plan is at the same time, if we were able to bring forward the question for you to answer and to take action on whether to repeal or submit the matter to the voters.
So that would typically be about 3 weeks from the time that we receive the notice?
We may be able to make that happen faster than 3 weeks.
I think it's all going to depend on what day it comes in, but it conceivably could happen quicker than 3 weeks, absolutely. I mean, so it's going to depend on the date we get notified as opposed to where it's on the calendar, et cetera, and so forth. But I don't foresee it taking that long, but 3 weeks is sort of our operational window, but it probably will be less. But again, it'll depend on when the calendar we get that notice will determine when we post it. But it will be the earliest date available to us to do the posting.
All right. And let me go to the election schedule. The next city election would be 2018, November 2018.
Yes, under your charter, the city holds general elections only in November of every other year, even years. However, the council would be able to call a special election, and one option, if the council chooses to call a special election, would be to call it on the same date as a countywide general election. The next countywide general elections that you could consider for this purpose would be in March of 2017 or in June of 2017.
And we've seen various reports of the cost of those types of elections versus waiting until 2018. Do you have that information, Mr. City Manager, to share with us today?
At this point, I don't believe we have a costing allocation for the future general elections. We could provide council, I believe it was, I don't know what it would be, if there would be a differentiation between a special election and a general, but we'll get that information out, and will be part of the staff report when we bring back the options for council to consider. But as of right this moment, no, we do not have that information.
I think it also may depend on whether, again, it would be, if you don't want to wait 2 years, you would be calling a special election. But if you call a special election on a date when the county is otherwise holding a county general election, for example, in March or perhaps in June, you may be able to be taking advantage of a lower cost situation because there would already be an election in place. And that's a conversation that we will be exploring with the county to understand how the cost allocation would be working. So even though in that case it would technically be calling a special election, if you're pairing it with the county on the same date, the cost may really be more like a general election.
And just one more question for me. Is the way this goes on the ballot, is that determined by the wording of the petition? And what I'm asking is, are we able to decide whether a no vote means no rent control or a yes vote means rescind rent control? How is that determined, what the question is?
Under state law, in this situation where you have a referendum, a yes vote would mean a yes to support the ordinance. A no vote would mean a no to repeal the ordinance.
Thank you.
Mr. Wasaki.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, and thank you for those responses. I assume that the petitions are public record, are they?
The petitions are not public record.
Okay. My question is this, using rough math, 4,000 signatures were over the threshold required. Is my assumption that when they do their sample, they being the county registrar, they'd have to find an error rate of 1 in 3, roughly, to say that it has not reached the level required? Just rough math.
So the random sampling you'd have to use the statistical analysis to then show that, because regardless of the number of signatures that were on the petition, you're randomly selecting 500. And so had there been 20,000 signatures, you're still only randomly selecting 500.
No, understood, but the error rate that they're going to extrapolate, which would be a function of what the overage is.
I'm going to leave this question to the city manager.
I'm not going to, right now on the fly, I'm not going to actually respectfully not get into the math. If the council member wants to put the math out there, I'm okay with that, but well, we're not, that's not our bailiwick and it's not our math problem.
I understand. I just, they have to have a basis to say yay or nay. And my concern is with the 12,000 signatures submitted, I personally heard misrepresentations made to our citizens. And I would guarantee there'd be a significant number of citizens/residents that signed that unawares. Now, yes, I know you should be looking at what you sign. You are responsible for it. If it's not public record, there's no way a resident or a registered voter in this city could access, at this point, access that petition to say we're on it or not. They're on it. Is that correct?
Well, if they signed it, they're on it. If they sent a signed request to the clerk prior to the time that the petition was filed, requesting that their signature be removed, those were forwarded to the registrar, and the registrar would have removed those signatures. We received 151 of those requests.
So basically, it's an incentive for these paid signature gatherers to just pick up the names however they can, and that affects the error rate. And I know that that's a statement and not a question, but that is very unfortunate in this democracy. Thank you.
Ms. Combs?
I guess I'm following up on that comment. Can you tell us the status of the investigation? My understanding is that there may be an investigation regarding how the signatures were gathered, but that investigation does not affect the presence of a signature on the document. So a person who may have had a devious signature gatherer can make a complaint against the gatherer, but at this point cannot remove their signature from the document. Is that correct?
Well, I think you've asked a couple of questions. I'll see if I can catch them all, and if I miss one, please let me know. The last question you asked, the state law, which is applicable in this case, requires that anyone who wants their name removed from a petition provide the request signed in writing to the city clerk, and the city clerk has to receive that prior to the time when the petition is filed. And so again, we received 151 of those requests. All of those were forwarded to the Registrar of Voters, who will have removed those individuals from the petition.
But it's too late now for someone else to do it.
That's correct.
Okay.
There is an investigation that is underway that is exploring whether there was any criminal activity in connection with the petition circulation process. There have been a number of complaints and allegations made, and that investigation is still underway.
Does that investigation have an effect on the validity of the petition?
The result of a criminal investigation, if a sufficient evidence of a crime is found, that would then be referred to the district attorney, and the district attorney would then decide whether to prosecute the individuals involved. That process would occur, that's a separate process from the petition process. The only way in which the investigation may impact the referendum process would be if there was evidence that was so widespread to suggest that all of the petition gatherers were giving misleading information that rises to a criminal level, which is a very high standard, to such a degree that it compromised the petition circulation process. It's a very, very high standard to meet, to get to that. Barring that high standard, the criminal investigation would proceed with respect to the involved individuals, if there, and any prosecution that were to happen as a result of that would proceed as to the affected individuals, but would not impact the referendum process.
If an individual wanted to file a complaint about a petition gatherer, how do they do that? Is it still possible to do that?
A complaint that alleges criminal activity or potential criminal activity in connection with the circulation process, yes. They can call the non-emergency police line and register their complaint, and the investigator will contact them.
Okay. Since the petition is a call to the ballot to ask us to place it on the ballot or repeal it, can we reinstate a moratorium on rent increases and just cause, since the petition specifically did not address that by allowing them to be repealed by the council? That's a complex question. Can we reinstate a moratorium on rent increases and just cause eviction until the election takes place?
No, you cannot.
Even though the ballot doesn't specifically say it's intended to stay?
It stayed by operation of state law, and state law controls in this case.
Okay. Because we have, last time I checked not long ago with legal aid, we have about 500 families in line at legal aid right now with rent increases and evictions. Okay. So when you bring back the cost information, I would be interested also in knowing the cost if we did vote by mail.
I'm sorry, could you repeat what you just said?
It's possible, instead of holding a election at a polling place, to hold the election as an entirely vote-by-mail election. And that's what I'm asking. Either with or without a county election at the same time, if it makes a difference. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing the report forward.
Thank you. I have a couple cards. Would you like to go before we hear from the cards? Go ahead, Ms. Carlstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Just a quick, one aspect that perhaps you already addressed this with Ms. Combs' questions, but did I understand you to suggest that there are no private challenge available to the validity of the petition gathering efforts themselves? Could a private citizen say, I and 200 other representative signers to this petition were fraudulently induced to sign this petition or given false premise for signing, essentially entering into this petition? Could that right of action challenge and stay the implementation of the referendum?
I do not believe there is a private right of action.
Okay. And the investigation's results are rather unimpactful as to the validity of the investigation. Even if an investigation reveals that a signature gatherer acted criminally, that does not impact the ability of the referendum to go forward.
It would have to be such a widespread level of misrepresentation. At first, it would have to be a misrepresentation that arises to a criminal level. Because you're dealing with First Amendment rights, the bar is exceptionally high.
So only criminal action negates the referendum, not tortious civil bad acts?
Well, it would need to be rise to the level of criminal activity within the meaning of the Elections Code. The Election Code makes it a misdemeanor. The standard for misrepresentation is very high because you are, of course, dealing here with First Amendment rights. So to make sure that you have cleared the hurdle of the First Amendment, the standard has to be very high. So that's the first response. So there is no tortious level. It would be criminal or not. In terms of affecting the referendum process as opposed to supporting a prosecutorial effort, it would have to be so widespread that it would impact the validity of the petition and the sufficiency of the signatures on the petition.
Do we have the information on which division of the District Attorney's Office is conducting the investigation?
The District Attorney's Office is not conducting the investigation.
Do we have information on where the investigation is being conducted?
So yes, I sent to council. I will resend that notice to council. That is happening through the city attorney's office.
And I
But
imagine
it's happening, the filing happens non-emergency police department since the petition drive is over, so there should not be an emergency call if people, as the city attorney said, we are receiving those through the non-emergency, through the police department. The investigator is working through the city attorney's office and is actively investigating issues as we speak.
So though a signer to the petition can no longer request to have their signature removed, they can still provide information relating to their experience in signing the petition
That's correct.
through the city attorney's office.
So
Through the non-emergency number at the police department, that's where they will start, and it'll get referred to the investigator.
Can we make that information available on the website again?
it is on the website.
It is on the website.
Thank you. This is hopefully all percolating out into the ether, which brings me to my next question. Assuming that I think most of us are, that the referendum stays, continues, moves forward, and is somehow on the ballot, what is the extent of the city's involvement in that campaign? I know as we put forward ballot initiatives, we are allowed to support them. what would the city's role be in this referendum being placed on the ballot?
So we do not campaign as city staff. We provide information.
So we would have to remain, the city's official language would have to remain neutral.
The council has adopted this ordinance. It would then move forward to the voters. Individual council members may certainly have their opinions and views, but as a city and functioning as a city body, you have made the statement that you've made, and we cannot campaign.
Okay, so no public funds expended in support of the existing policy of the city of Santa Rosa?
We can provide information. We cannot campaign.
That's, of course, different than funds being expended on dealing with the fact that you have an ordinance and a program that are potentially going to be taking effect. There's quite a bit of ramp up required from city staff on this, but in terms of campaigning, no, you cannot campaign for this in your official capacity.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to clarify that the investigation is being run through the city attorney's office, but the investigator is working in connection with and in cooperation with the police department, and ultimately the report from the investigator will go to the police department, and it will be the police chief's call about whether to make a referral to the prosecutor based on whatever evidence the investigator has uncovered.
Let's go. We have a couple cards here. So our first one, Ann Seeley.
Good afternoon, Council and Vice Mayor. It was to be expected, I guess, when an industry unused to limits other than market forces in how much it makes in profits meets a city council doing right by its constituents, there will be a clash. I am proud of you, Council, for what you passed in your ordinances and your actions that you've taken. I think that it's clear that the intention of this petition was to stymie your actions by delay until the matter is before voters, and who knows when that will be if it goes to election. That election would cost the city of Santa Rosa a lot of money, which would make us all pretty mad, I think. Please consider the ways in which you might, until further definitive action is taken, how you might protect renters in this interim period. That might include a moratorium such as the ones that you have previously passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Chernoff.
I'll start off by saying that the renters keep passing the buck, and all they do is complain and whine instead of simply getting together and boycotting all the rents. That would simply take care of the problem, because if one person doesn't pay their rent, they get kicked out. If everybody doesn't pay their rent, then you got power. And so it is that my investigation shows that despite numerous efforts to enlist law enforcement and the district attorney's involvement, they've been deflected various ways. And regarding the alleged petition, I would have to say words like misleading, deceptive, elusive, shady, criminal. I'd have to look up Roget's Thesaurus and Black's Law to get all the definitions. But on the other hand, as it's been given, as you do unto the least of me, which has always been the animals. And so we have communities full of vampires eating their dead, murdered animal flesh, thinking that the almighty creator doesn't see what is going on. And so this is clearly verifies to me and to many that are listening that man's ridiculous, futile efforts can never overwhelm Almighty Creator's will. Those who seek to save their lives shall lose them. Therefore, as has been given before you for over a decade, the prophetic 40-day freedom strike that frees Leonard Peltier, the U.S. Constitution, and you and I. Martin Luther King said, if one man's wrongfully incarcerated, so are we all. But we seem to forget that, and then we goof around with stupid things like this instead of doing what needs to be done. I would certainly hope that students would finally have the cojones and the ovarios to boycott these ridiculous schools that maintain the entire status quo. They are the most powerful people on the planet, but they think they're going to learn something from teachers that are too scared to lead. And these renters, the whining complainers, it's called a general strike. It's called a boycott. Stop paying into the system that's raping you. Do something. It's been 40 years since anybody or any group in this country has done a thing. It was the 60s when the UC Berkeley students walked out against the war. And those students have done a darn thing since then, except play with their goddamn telephones and their computers. It's called synthetic telepathy. So you think you're thinking as long as you never do anything that makes a difference. And that goes for the people that are in labor and you renters as well. Wake up and do something.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to council. Any questions for city attorney or city clerk on this item? Mr. Wasaki?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. On the question of the actual referendum, is it possible, should the council put this to a vote to the public, and it restores the votes, the rents to the level in the original ordinance, the monies that were collected, additional monies, if any, what happens to that money?
The way the ordinance works is that on the first effective date of the ordinance, when the ordinance takes effect, the rents on that date are automatically reset back to what they were on January 1st of 16, whenever the date is that the ordinance takes effect. So in your example, if you moved forward and had an election in March, we certified the election results and say, I'm going to arbitrarily pick March 15th. I don't know that it can happen that fast. The ordinance were to take effect. Then as of March 15th, 2017, rents would be reset to their January 1st, 16 level going forward. The ordinance does not reset rents that were lawfully put into place before the ordinance took effect. There would be no ability for the city to force landlords to reimburse tenants for lawful rent increases or rent levels that were in place prior to the time that the ordinance takes effect.
Thank you. You anticipated my next question, but just to summarize, if a property owner was able to increase their rent by an aggregate of $5,000 per typical unit, and the populace were to say, we want rent control at the level, and therefore the rent goes back down, that $5,000 does not get refunded to the tenant. It stays in the property owner's pocket. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's a sobering answer, and I'm not going to yell at our community youngsters or young adults up there, because the future's in your hands, and you probably know someone that's renting, maybe more than one. But the lesson is, look at what you sign, and that could probably be for everybody here. But it's your world. This is the world you're going to inherit. And I hope that this lesson is not lost on you. I'm not trying to preach to you. I'm trying to hopefully help you make this world a better place.
Ms. Combs?
Thank you. I'm trying to understand a way that we can protect our renters between now and the time it's decided on the ballot. So I have a couple of questions. One of them is that I understand there is an ordinance regarding, or that there is a California code regarding price gouging, and that the California code regarding price gouging includes rental units during a declared emergency. Our city council has declared an emergency. Increases, my understanding is that this law that the price gouging law limits increases to 10% above the regular price. I don't know if our city has a separate additional ordinance regarding price gouging and penalties to price gouging. But I would like us to, since we have declared an emergency in our city regarding housing, I think that we could be applying the price gouging rules to increases above 10%, unless we have an ordinance that says something more stringent or that has applicable penalties. So I would like to understand that, and I appreciate that this is some possibly creative thinking on my part. I would like to know if you can come back to us with more information on that. I do not know how that ordinance is enacted, if it's done by individuals, if we need to direct legal aid to that, or if our city can take an action based on the price gouging ordinance.
I'm happy to come back with a report on that.
Thank you. The second question that I have is, I hear you that you have determined that we cannot pass a moratorium on price increases at this time, based upon your best legal opinion. It does happen, and has happened, that I have heard other legal opinions on this matter. If we make the decision to pass a moratorium, understanding that it is not your recommendation, what do you anticipate as the consequences of that?
I think that there may be others who share my view and who
I'm willing to believe that.
take appropriate action.
Okay, thank you. So if you would look into the price gouging regulations, I would very much appreciate it. I only learned about this aspect, actually I only thought of this today, so I didn't have a previous question to you, and I appreciate your willingness to look into it.
So just a point of clarification, are you saying there is an existing ordinance in the city, or there's a state law?
There is a state law, and the state law does not preclude there being a city ordinance. I do not know if there's a city ordinance. Right.
Just looking for clarification because
Yes,
it's to law, and I just
yeah,
just
there
wanna
is
make
a
sure.
state law. We've declared the emergency. I think we meet the standard for the declaration of emergency and the price gouging features of that ordinance, especially since they do apply to rental housing. Thank you.
Mr. Corsi.
Thank you. Ms. Stricker, I believe you said that it will be the decision of the police chief to determine whether or not to ask the district attorney to file criminal charges if at the end of the investigation. Will we know what that decision is?
Yes, you will.
And will the results of that investigation be available to us and the public?
So I guess I'm looking for a little clarity on what, will we report out the results of the investigation? Yes, absolutely.
Can I follow that with a basis for the decision?
Well, whatever legal threat, I mean, I think that we're going to be doing this in consultation with the city attorney's office to see it meets the threshold, which is pretty high, that this is not a First Amendment determinant. We'll report that out in that conversation.
All right, that's fine.
The normal course of action that will be followed as in any investigation that the city were to handle. The only difference here is that rather than using city staff and pulling city staff from other duties that they are doing, we have retained a private investigator who will be following the same protocol. The individual is a retired police officer and is very familiar with that protocol. As with any investigation that the police department would be handling, ultimately it's the chief of police or his designee who makes a determination about whether to make a referral for a potential criminal prosecution to the district attorney's office. Of course, at that point, it's the district attorney who has within her discretion about whether to pursue prosecution or not. Any investigation that would get handed off to the district attorney for potential consideration for criminal prosecution, while we can certainly report that matter, we wouldn't be able to get into specifics about a matter that potentially would then be considered for prosecution.
Any prediction on how long the investigation will go?
It's difficult to say at this point because the investigator hasn't completed his work and does get some new calls or leads as it goes along. We're happy to report on that, the progress periodically, and we'll certainly report when the process has ended.
Thank you.
Ms. Carlstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, and apologies in advance to the city attorney, and if we need to come back to my question, I'm happy to do it. It just occurs to me that I am aware that in other communities, councils have issued statements of public safety priority, that such and such act is the lowest enforcement priority for the city of X. Could the reverse be true? Could this council issue a statement of policy that referring this referendum for prosecution is a high council priority? Bearing in mind, I know the limits of our discretion over the police department. I'm asking whether it is possible.
So there are specific standards that the police chief needs to use in order to make a determination about whether to refer something to the district attorney for prosecution. And it is not within the council's discretion to determine how the police chief does that function, which he is required to do and must be done by a sworn peace officer. That said, certainly you could make a statement about the importance of this overall issue, a policy statement. You would be free to do that, but the police chief will need to perform his duties as he's required to do under applicable state law and under the charter and as required by the city manager.
I fully appreciate the independence and authority of the police chief as he stands at the top of our auditorium here. Just thank you for the information. I think it may be just a useful tool as the council considers how do we continue restating the policy of the city of Santa Rosa.
Ms. Combs?
Thank you. I see at least coming down the road at some point that we may want to also have a conversation about how we improve the disclosure regulations for petition gatherers. And if we have any consequences for violating those disclosure regulations. And would hope that at some point when we've settled down a little bit, that we bring back and have a serious conversation about what we can do as a council with regard to improving disclosure. For example, the petition gatherers did not have to declare who was funding the petition gathering until the end of the process. So can we move the date up, require an application in advance, for example? Can we require that the petition clearly state on it who's funding the petition? I don't know these things, and at some point, we probably want to have that conversation and decide how our city wants to handle future instances. Thank you. And I appreciate our legal staff for stepping up. I appreciate the city manager for working with us on the investigative part when the district attorney declined to do so. I appreciate that she might decline because of the high standard, but I appreciate the stepping up to provide the that our council had an interest in providing the investigation. If the district attorney declines to take it, even if our chief recommends it, do we have any other options?
I think, again, let's get through the investigation first before I get into a conversation about that. I mean, so.
All right, council, any more questions for staff? I also want to echo my comments and gratitude because I know this has been a high priority and it's adjusted some of the workload, but I think all of staff, city clerk, city attorney, and city manager's office have been very responsive to the needs and interests, and I'm sure the chief of police is also hearing the interest that this council has on this item, so I really appreciate your efforts. So with that, we'll move to the first public comment. Do we have any cards? And if someone could let the mayor know he can come back now. Thank you. Thank you. First card, Elizabeth Nealon.
Yeah, I just shut my book, so let's see. There it is. Okay, good. Well, hi. I need the overhead, please. Is it ready? Okay. Okay. Well, another beautiful day. We're almost at the anniversary of, I believe it's the second anniversary of when Andy Lopez was killed on October the 22nd. But it might be the third. Someone thought it was the third, so I'll find out. But one of the main reasons I had to come today was because of these notations that have appeared in the women's bathroom at the senior center, 704 Bennett Valley Road. About 5 weeks ago, I forgot to write the date down when the first ones appeared. There's these pink notices like glued to the mirror, they taped to the mirrors in the bathroom at the women's bathroom. And they say no bathing, no washing hair, and no brushing teeth. And then in small print at the bottom, they say, if you have any questions, talk to the front desk, which I didn't bother to do. I just went to tear it down when I first saw it, and I thought, no, I tore it a little bit. I thought, leave it there, you can talk to the city council about it. Well, about a week ago, they put up a new one on the door, no loitering. And I didn't read the small print this time. Anyway. I think that would be called disenfranchising the poor. And I think the poor own those bathrooms as much as anyone else does. As I've used the senior center for many, many years. And the policy there is that you don't have to be 55, even to go to the classes. It's basically very open to people of all ages. And so on that note, I'll just continue on with something else. City bus service on weekend mornings. I don't have my overhead yet. Have I done something wrong, perchance? There it is. I see the light, but I don't see I don't see the part over there. Okay, let's see. Okay, the part about me and my effort to have free speech. There's several aspects to my free speech campaign, and one of them is my chalk drawings. And I have literally been stalked by the local graffiti abatement people. The police have talked to me and said, as long as it's chalk, we don't really care, just don't use anything permanent. But they erase Emily Dickinson's poetry, and that is a crime against nature, you know. When you go to all the, have you ever heard the verse that goes, the inner paints the outer, the brush without the hand? It's a great poem. I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Nealon. Anita LaFleur.
I do want to say one thing. I was having the bus schedule under the overhead, and I wanted to point out how very inadequate the bus service is on weekend mornings on my line.
Thank you. Anita LaFleur.
Good afternoon. I thought we were doing this, this is all about the homeless, right? We're on 14.2?
This is
13.
you're now in public comment for
Public
items
comment.
not on the agenda.
Thank you. My public comment is on a comment that was made at the subcommittee. That was on September 21st by a homeless man who said that he was living downtown Railroad Square, and there was a lot of commotion down there, and he didn't know whether it was the police or whether or not it was some others, like a vigilante group or something like that. And I wanted to let you know that I did go to the police department. I wrote a letter to them so that they could investigate. And also, there were some that were talking to the police. And what we found out was that there's someone who came forward, and not a homeless person, and said that there is a private security company that manages a lot of the park over there and makes sure people don't put down blankets and lay down, and that they don't use the park. And so I wanted to let you know that, because I'm sure the police said that it wasn't them that was causing all this commotion. So the homeless man was right. It was someone it was someone else, and apparently they wear a badge, but it doesn't say police department. It says SoCo Security. And I don't know how to proceed with a complaint against them for not allowing people, because this was not a homeless person who was shooed off the plaza there and not allowed to walk around. And so I was wondering, would I go directly to SoCo myself and say, you know, this is a little, anyway, I thought I'd put that here for you to ponder over, and I'll be pursuing it and keeping you updated. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Chernoff.
Sacred invitation, taking this nation to its highest station. To Turtle Island, the promised land, by authority of prophecy, by Creator's command. Organized religion spent centuries spinning deceptions of a mighty radical indigenous man, the fiercest truth speaker who guaranteed a true plan, telling us whoever be seeking to save their own lives shall lose them indeed in this nation of nations, all deceived, serving greed. Far greater be the beautiful prophecy now calling you for the world to see. I bind them all, yes, every goddamn illusion. Release your brave heart from worldly confusion. This full moon tune be our high noon, all strength and love, no room for fear. The 40-day West Coast shutdown frees ourselves after freeing Leonard Peltier. I was reading a little flyer you had up here on the table about domestic violence. Poisoning people is domestic violence. And the mainstream news has all but ignored the North Dakota DAPL water situation with the oil. And that kind of reminds you that Aaron Brockovich, a year ago, said that there's over 220 communities worse than Flint, Michigan, and Hinckley, California. I think we still got 50 or so states, and we got 220 communities worse, which means there's probably several thousand that are close to being as bad. Our religions have taught murdering is okay. It maintains all the domestic abuse of people. I pray I'm clear and not too obtuse. The religions versus the carpenter, centuries of pulpit liars maintaining Sataniel's desires, deceptions galore maintaining all war, millions of vets and women and children without a house, as the religious deceivers have vampirically deceived. And every day, 14 million beautiful sentients demised at the slaughterhouse. You ever thought about Googling famous vegans, famous Hispanic vegans, famous black vegans? Anybody ever tell you the story of why Daniel and the lions did not eat him in the den? He was a vegan. Cesar Chavez Dolores Huerta were vegans. Domestic violence is indeed terrorized, brutalized 14 million beautiful, sentient, slaughterhouse murdered daily, all in service to greed. And you're wondering why you got problems with rents? You got no goddamn spiritual common sense.
Steve Dunright?
That was
Sorry, you caught me off guard. I wasn't even prepared for this yet. That's way too soon. We're just getting started. But I think about all the rent control. As far as I've observed by all these people I get to talk to that have jobs, rent control is already ridiculously high anyway. If you're going to do anything, take it down 30% and make it reasonable for somebody that makes $1,800 a month to be able to not only get a place to live, but have money left for food. Because if you're making money, you don't even get food stamps. So I know some people that are starving to death because they don't want to lose their shelter, but they have no money left over. So if you did rent control now, and all this time and money wasted, if a homeless person's pulling on a sidewalk, the investigation and the arrest is less than an hour, that lady's been taking phone calls for weeks and weeks about this erroneous report. And there's people that are literally working for shelters for the homeless that signed that illegal form. If I wrote a bad check, you guys would be all over me. No time for investigation. But yet nobody's been in any trouble, and we're investigating something that's gone. It's like going after the student body in July when school's over in May. These people, when they were getting phone calls, were at Safeway and other places. And if you're a mother with a baby and groceries in a hurry, with all due respect, you're not going to stop and read all the fine print when they just told you what it's all about. Here's your pen, sign please. Yes, I need to get rent control. Me and my baby need a place. Where can I sign? Here, hold the baby, and I'll read this and come back in an hour. Isn't what's going to happen. So with all due respect for the students and everybody else, I'm sorry. Sometimes we put belief in people saying stuff. Nobody says I'm a liar, believe my lie, and then sign this piece of paper. Somebody has to be made as accountable because wrongdoings are going. And now we're talking elections. Everything I hear about is all this money that's going to be spent, and nobody's going to be the culprit. And then, sorry, folks, we were going to help some of the homeless, but we just spent $10,000 on investigations. The other thing is, like I say, that fraudulent action, according to what I'm hearing, it isn't happening anymore. Should have caught him in the act. The opportunity was there. I know how fast police can be dispensed to get homeless people from sleeping underneath a bridge at 6 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. Another issue, has anything been referred to that when the police officers are so nice to come and say you can't sleep here, that they can start saying you can't be here after 8 o'clock because the store opens at 9, but you can sleep here until then? Has anything been done to get more information since the last time? I hear there's going to be 2 new bathrooms open up, I think somewhere's in that vicinity of the new park with the fish that jumps out of the water, and there's going to be 2 showers. The showers are on the street side. The only reason they're there is because the fact that somebody in the state or the government thinks that it's a swimming pool and you have to have a little shower to wash your feet.
Thank you, Mr. Dunright.
I've still got 6, 7, 8, and 9. When did that come up?
6, 7, 8, 9 what?
I just started with the things I'm writing down, stuff I'm
Yeah,
still
sorry, you're
here.
out of time.
So I can
3
reapply?
minutes.
I get to reapply?
No, you don't. Sorry. Steve Elliott?
He spoke twice.
Next week. 3 minutes per meeting for items not on the agenda.
Hello. I've been generally given notice and being evicted from my apartment for 4.5 months, started in April. I've lived in the apartment for 15 years. And I'm beginning to think I could do this for about 4 or 5 years and I wouldn't find a place to rent, not just months. I also have Parkinson's. I've had that for 14 years. I've gone to Washington, D.C., and I've been an advocate, and I've talked to congressmen. And it shows me the futility of our government. And I'm not just doing this for some philosophical reason that it'll never happen. I'd like to know which of you have ever slept in your car. Yeah. I hadn't either, actually. I grew up in an upper middle class family. But it's a lot different when you actually do it. It's like camping, you know. It's a lot of fun to go camping when you want to. But if you're homeless and you have to go sleep under a bridge, it's not that much fun. So it all depends on who's doing it, I guess, if you're unlucky enough to end up in that situation. So I thought I'd wear some conservative clothes, and then people will pay attention to me. But the problems are still the same. And incredible amounts of money we spend on campaigns at the national level, $100 million. What would they do for poor people? For food, let alone a place to sleep. So you don't have to answer to me, and you probably don't have to answer anybody in this room, but you might be interested in answering to yourself when you look in the mirror in the morning. Oh, and I have to leave my apartment by the 21st of this month, and I don't have a place to sleep. Which of you have a big house willing to give me a room in your house? Just think about it. Not for me, do it for you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Victoria Yanez.
Good evening. My name is Victoria Yanez, and I am here to make a statement for a community member who was unable to be present today. I'm representing Richard Canini. That's C-A-N-I-N-I. He is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana right now, working to mitigate flood damage. On or about May 20th, 2014, Santa Rosa City Council passed Resolution 28480. A result of this resolution was Santa Rosa City making a loan of over $1 million to Coddingtown Simon Properties. Mr. Simon is a Wall Street billionaire. He made over $120 million in 2014. It seems the city borrowed from Wall Street at about 6% and then made a loan to Wall Street. Mr. Simon is at just 3%. But wait, there's more. The loan from city to Cottingtown Simon Properties has a provision whereby half the loan, principal and interest, need not be paid back to the city, the taxpayers. The loan from Wall Street to the city does need to be paid back in full, including principal and interest and fees to Wall Street. The loss to the taxpayers is about $750,000. Santa Rosa City Council member Combs voted against the resolution 28480. Council member Olivares voted for the resolution to, in effect, give our money to a Wall Street billionaire. It's clear Ms. Combs stands with the 99%. Where does Mr. Olivares stand? Both Ms. Combs and Mr. Olivares are seeking re-election. With 4 council positions open and 6 candidates, it's important to know whom to vote for and whom not to vote for. Please remember, occupy, never let die. And thank you, whoever was monitoring the sound. It doesn't work for me.
Those are all the cards that I have. Mr. McGlynn, 14.2.
Item 14.2, report, expand year-round community homeless assistance program, CHAP. Kelly Kuykendall, program specialist, presenting.
Good evening, Mayor Sawyer and members of the council. The item before you this evening seeks approval of the Community Homeless Assistance Program guidelines. To provide you with some background, last October, I was here before you and you approved a pilot program, CHAP with 2 Ps, for the 2015-16 winter months. That program ran between November 2015 and March 2016 and allowed for safe parking, the placement of portable toilets, and temporary overnight shelter. In March, Council extended the program by 30 days to April 30th as a result of rainy conditions and a shortage of shelter beds and housing for the unsheltered. You also, at that time, extended the winter shelter bed program at Sam Jones Hall. In July, we were before you and you received a report from staff regarding the potential for an expanded year-round CHAP program. Council directed staff to work with the Homeless Policy Subcommittee to prepare appropriate ordinance amendments for an expanded program. And as you all know, on August 9th, Council declared a homeless emergency in Santa Rosa. This action provides the city with more flexibility to address the homeless crisis. Following that meeting, the subcommittee, through a technical advisory committee, prepared recommendations in the following 3 areas: strategy adoption, the adoption of a comprehensive homeless services strategy, CHAP guidelines, and an emergency declaration work plan. That was presented to the subcommittee on September 19th. The subcommittee directed staff to prioritize the creation of the draft guidelines that are before you this evening. That's as a result of our current homeless crisis and the approaching winter months. So, similar to last winter, these guidelines allow property owners to use their properties or facilities which meet the zoning code definition for meeting facility, public or private, for a range of activities. The expanded program before you this evening has a number of new activities. These include safe parking or safe camping, placement and maintenance of portable toilets, including access to existing bathroom facilities, provision of temporary overnight shelter, and storage for personal belongings. The guidelines before you this evening are general operating guidelines. If you approve them, staff plan to further refine the interim guidelines as part of a code amendment process. If you approve the guidelines this evening, it would allow for immediate implementation of the program and would allow for interested parties to begin operations to further address the homeless crisis in Santa Rosa. With that, the recommendation, it is recommended by the Housing and Community Services Department that the council by resolution issue regulations under the city's declaration of homeless emergency to allow for immediate implementation of an expanded year-round community homeless assistance program to include safe parking, safe camping, the placement and maintenance of portable toilets, including access to existing bathroom facilities, provision of temporary overnight shelter, and storage for personal belongings. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Ms. Kuykendall. Council, questions at this point? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. First, Kelly, I'd like to compliment you. I know you and others, staff members, received a lot of feedback at the last subcommittee meeting, and I think you've captured most, if not all, of the interests that were expressed there. So I really applaud the efforts on a relatively short time frame. I know you had a lot of other things going on in the city, so I really want to compliment your efforts. One clarifying point I would like to hear on the page 1 of the guidelines, it says all participating owners shall coordinate services with the homeless outreach services team. Would that imply that anyone who is participating, a client, if we will, in this, would participate in coordinated entry?
That is the intent. It's also the intent that this is an additional outreach opportunity for the host program and to engage people that are being served under CHAP into our broader system of care to address their homelessness, which would include the coordinated entry.
Great. Thank you very much.
Other questions, Ms. Combs?
I'd like to clarify that clarifying question. And thank you also for the work that you've done on this. This is a fast turnaround time. I appreciate staff really moving on this before we get into the October weather. I just want to confirm that we aren't requiring property owners to be able to do data entry into the coordinated care system, but that we are simply talking about making a referral.
We're asking them to engage with the host program. So if they're already entering data into HMIS, then that's great, but it's not going to be mandatory.
Okay, so we're not requiring that. And do we have coming forward at any future time funding to facilitate the implementation of this program? Is that we may have entities that will need to have assistance in funding bathroom, porta potties, sinks. The host program may need an additional staff member. I just don't know where we are in the process of funding the additional services that we're allowing.
There has been no funding request to date. There obviously are opportunities down the line as the program is implemented, but at this time we're not. There's no scheduled date to bring back a funding request.
Okay. I really want to say again, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we have 500 families in line at legal aid because of the stay on our rent stabilization and just cause for eviction policies. So we don't know how many new homeless families we're going to get this winter, and on top of the large existing population. So I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I want to appreciate my fellow council members for the work on the subcommittee, and let's get some opportunity sites.
Thank you. Council, any other preliminary questions? Mr. Corsi?
Just a couple of questions on the guidelines, and I want to also say I'm really glad to see this coming forward. It's a great start. On page 2 of the guidelines, in a couple of places, it talks about compliance with the city's smoking ordinance. I'm wondering what that means for a facility like this, where there are a significant number of people sharing a space, but it's not necessarily sharing walls in a multi-family dwelling. So how does the smoking ordinance apply here?
I'm not familiar with how the ordinance would apply specifically in this situation. This was provided through the city attorney's office, so I would defer to you to answer that.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to report back on that item, and I don't think that the folks here have an answer to that question, but I can report back on that item.
Okay, I can see this becoming a sticky issue. So I think the more clarity we can get, the better.
Right, and and again, like anything, as we learn through the process, we may need to amend it. I think the intent is to follow council's direction as it relates to a smoking ordinance and where applicable, apply it. But we'll look at the matter specifically, council member, and understanding your concern, we well understand that.
Thank you. The other is the issue of servicing and cleaning bathrooms on a regular basis. We're not defining regular basis. Some people's idea of a clean bathroom is different than others. That, again, just seems to need more clarity.
They're guidelines, so I hear what you're saying, and we're going to take that into consideration as we move forward. And certainly, if we get any complaints from people about the cleanliness of the toilets that they're providing, then we would work directly with the property on that site to remedy the situation.
Okay. Again, I know this, I'm being a nitpicking person here, but overall, nice work. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olivares.
Thank you, Mayor. It was my understanding, as it relates to the smoking ordinance, that it is in place. There's no exemptions to the smoking ordinance. So depending on where they're housing people within their facilities, if it's indoors, they can't. So just ensuring that they're not providing any exemptions to our current ordinance, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And my concern wasn't so much for the indoor part of it, it's the outdoor part when people are actually living close together.
Right.
Mr. Wysocki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am thankful for staff for turning around and giving this back and to help our homeless population. I think this is a very necessary part for too many of us in this town that are out there. I am concerned about, on the next slide, if you could move it forward one, talk about two maybe. There we go. Safe parking, safe camping, storage for personal belongings. What I heard this morning at the downtown subcommittee is that certain crimes, certain infractions, certain misdemeanors, and some property crimes that rise to the felony level are not getting referred for prosecution, and that bothers me. And I would like to at least ask the committee, ask staff to start the conversation that some of the most vulnerable of us that are suffering because of this, to at least start the conversation with the county as to why at least the crimes that our law enforcement officers are declining to send forward because they know it's not going to get prosecuted, why those aren't going forward. I think that's a very important question that this community needs to deal with, and I would like to see that sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Mr. Wysocki. Other questions, council, before I go to public comment? Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up? Mr. Wysocki, are you referencing felonies in particular?
It was disclosed this morning that there were felonies, particularly property crimes, that are above the threshold that are not going forward because they don't feel they're going to get prosecuted.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to public comment. Anita LaFollette, followed by Gregory Farron.
I'm sorry, I'm a little stymied starting right now after the last comment, but I will say that I want to let you know that we're really for the CHAP program and that we are building the huts. And I don't know if you know what the huts look like, but another person in my group has pictures of them if you'd like to see. And we are doing that in conjunction with AmeriCorps. In fact, they were building on them today, and they have all the supplies to build, I think, 20, and we need a place to put them. And I know a great place, but I won't tell you where, and there are some spaces in the city limits that could use a few places to put these huts so that people have a place to sleep, so they won't be out and about causing felonies, but, and other things. So I want to make sure you know that we're on top. We're going to put these huts somewhere. And then there's also the question of, does this mean that the encampment is now legal, the one that's behind Dollar Tree? Because that would be really great for them to hear that. I don't see anybody here tonight, but I told them I'd ask. And yeah, for us homeless folks, we need to put everybody in a shelter now. It's going to be flu season. The rain is coming down. Sleeping out there is not healthy. I have a guy that I have to go to another APS report on. It'll be my second one, because even though I find him shelter, he doesn't stay in it. For disabilities makes it really difficult for people who have a lot of conditions that they need to take care of. And so I'll keep working on that, but we do need places to put them. Thank you.
Thank you. Gregory Thurin, followed by Cynthia Stebbins.
Gregory Farron, 2040 Elizabeth Way. I've stood before you lots of times asking you to partner with the community, and this is a perfect example of a great partnership. I was out there for 5 hours today building those huts, putting bolt holes and hundreds of boards of lumber. It's an exciting time. You all have stepped up and taken, hopefully if you approve this, a lot of actions that make it possible for the rest of the community to really do its thing, to help in many ways. We've all been looking for a kind of green light to try to experiment with things. There are a lot of people with ideas, and they're beginning to think that some of those ideas might take root, and they might be able to do something. This is a perfect, like I said, example of the community and the city joining together to try to make it possible for some experimentation in an area that's absolutely needing experimentation. We know that we're not going to be able to build all the housing that we need in the traditional kinds of ways. We're going to have to experiment, and there are a lot of people willing to step up to the plate and put their energy and their money into the process. But they needed some signals from you that you were willing to bend the rule a little bit, adopt some new policies, pave the way, be pioneers. You're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Stebbins, followed by Thomas Ells.
Good evening. I posted the following on social media some time ago, so I'm going to read that to you. 10 huts, excuse the voice, I'm battling a cold. 10 huts, and I mean literally and figuratively, enter one Monday morning at a homeless action meeting in Santa Rosa. Myself, with a long-time involvement with homeless action and my current first-time experience as a face of homelessness. Harold Wallen, the designer and prototype builder of the hut, a mindful and compassionate guy beaming with hut pride and the eagerness to do something. AmeriCorps, an organization wanting to contribute volunteers to address something in the homeless arena. First United Methodist Church, hereafter referred to as FUMC, with plans in the making for the use of their Giffen property to host an encampment. Serendipity? Perhaps. My mind went into synergy mode. In very little time, these four groups were connected. I am now leading this exciting project. FUMC is at this point has graciously provided us a building site. We are on our way to building 10 huts October 15th through the 22nd. All parties involved are hoping for expansion of the CHAP program to include safe camping. City of Santa Rosa, this will bring these artistic, safe, and loving huts to a piece of land near you. Some comments, I will just read 3 that were stated on my post to the social media. Comment number 1 was, wow, all uppercase. Comment 2, CC, I know I live in Santa Cruz, but can I come and help build those in Santa Rosa? Comment number 3, what a wonderful thing for your project. For the city of Santa Rosa is considering the safe camping. This shows compassion, dedication, and intention. Please keep me posted. That ends my media post, but wait, there's more. Since then, enter the Sonoma County Task Force for the Homeless. One fundraiser brought us enough dough to build 10 huts. My vision of a village is hopefully becoming tangible and real. To the council, I say, please, let's not have these humanitarian huts leave our city. It doesn't happen until you decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Ells.
Hi, great, and thank you so much. Forgive me for not walking down there. I've spent all day on my knees making huts and drilling and screwing things together, and we made 10 of the frames for the base of them, and of course we made all of the wall parts, so they're ready to put together and everything for 10 of them, and we're looking to make 10 more, so there could be 20. Who's going to do that? But actually, AmeriCorps has come together, and this is a really fantastic project that the AmeriCorps staff themselves really are fighting each other from Napa and everywhere to come and participate to build these. So we look forward to that on the 15th and the 22nd. But in order for those to be effective and successful, we need you to vote for this, and this is very important. And the one thing that I would add, all of this is great, and we look forward to those amendments that clarify these, but the coordinated entry part that has to do with a private party, what that really says is that Catholic Charities is going to assign the bed for that place. Now, that is been agreed upon essentially for the First United Methodist Church. They want that. But not everybody wants that. Not everybody wants Catholic Charities to be assigning who is going to go wherever that is. And so I would ask you to take a little sharper pencil to look at that coordinated entry and say that maybe there's coordinated entry, but that it doesn't have to be through Catholic Charities and HMIS. That, in other words, the decision isn't made over here. They can decide who's going to be on their property and then put that in. Sort of like if you look at a union, unions can say, the employer is employing somebody and he's working there and he says, okay, well, we'll put him in the union. And then that's how they put him in the union rather than getting on a big long list. So there's two different ways to get in the union. There ought to be two different ways to get into the coordinated entry. One where somebody says, these are the people that we want, rather than take whoever they send you. That's a kind of a problem for some places. Partly because of, housing first and all that, and some people don't want to have that. And as for instance, First United Methodist Church doesn't want that either, so it really doesn't fit with the coordinated entry. It doesn't, so maybe it needs to be modified is my point. But this is fabulous. This is great. We have 10 huts that are coming right now, and we look forward to this moment. It's a great moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the cards I have at this point. Bring it back to the council. Council, any questions at this point? Sure. Ms. Combs.
I just want to get some clarification from staff. One of the individuals asked about a property, an encampment that I believe is on county property, and I just want to confirm that this is citywide and would not apply to county property. That's my understanding.
Yeah, citywide, and I believe Ms. La Follette was referring to Camp Michaela, which is on the county property.
Okay, so it would not apply. And the other question I have has to do with the continuum of care, the assignment of the spots by Catholic Charities as opposed to the property owner possibly saying we want to make a spot available for a particular individual and then refer them. Are we in any way committing that the spaces are assigned only by Catholic Charities, or is there a different process?
I think we have some flexibility there. Jenny Lynn and I we've spoken about this and agreed that we need to sit down and flesh out the details of what it looks like for hosts to be coordinating services with these property owners.
I'm sorry, I meant coordination of services. I think I said continuum of care.
Well, you said continuum of care and coordinated entry. So.
Okay, good. So I guess we have some interest in having the property owner have a say. Thank you.
Sure, Ms. Carlstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, Ms. Kuykendall, with respect to the facilities that are going to be contemplated for these sort of private uses, do we have any idea how many facilities meet that zoning code designation?
I do not. I don't have that information available. I mean, I know that they're in the Redwood Gospel Missions Entertaining Angels program last winter, there were 30 churches that participated. And then Catholic Charities Safe Parking Program has, I think, 7 sites right now. So all of those met that criteria. But beyond that, I don't have the information, but we could look into it.
I would be interested in that, and I'm not intending to throw a wrench in the works. I would like to see some more information on how many sites we have made available, because I'm aware that when we have on occasion made things go via zoning, that we unintentionally constrain the availability, the available spaces. So, yes, Mr.
I guess I'm confused a little bit by the question and the concern, so I'm trying to get a little more.
So if you go to slide 5, the CHAP guidelines allow property owners, properties which meet the zoning code definition for a meeting facility, public or private. That's one zoning designation.
Sure.
So how many facilities, how many properties qualify? How many have we caught?
So this is, again, where I think we're going to have some flexibility is if we discover during the process that that there's interest and the subcommittee feels that this is a place for us to address those interests. This is an iterative process.
Great.
So I wouldn't conclude that we're at the end of the road, but again, this is the capture point that we were an understanding based on the pilot program from last year where we were likely to get interest. There was felt to be a magnitude of scale associated with that particular interest. And so I think the subcommittee is aware of that, and if we feel like this doesn't address, I think staff will bring those concerns back to the subcommittee for further conversations. So we're not trying to be limiting in this conversation, but we were basing it upon discoveries from last year's process and where there was comfortability within the subcommittee about the scale of the land use type around that particular thing. But you shouldn't take this as the definitive statement. We will learn as we go through the process and we will adjust accordingly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will certainly be interested, though I doubt I will be here, in seeing an expansion on the available property uses. I think there may be some additional supportive underlying zoning categories and land use designations that we're maybe not already capturing, and I would hate to deter people that want to participate in this program. Thank you.
Good question. Other questions, council, before I entertain a motion? And then we can have final comment. Mr. Oliveris, you have this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to thank staff, the TAG, for doing this in such a short amount of time. I know we set it as a priority, but thank you for the work that you've done. This is a lot of good work. It is an evolution, and this is a big step forward as we continue to implement all the things that we can do to address this issue. I also want to thank my colleagues on the committee for their work. It has not been easy, but there's a lot more work to do. So we will continue with that. I do have an interest in ensuring that we do stick to the intent of coordinated entry and that we do these assessments, make sure that we have the most vulnerable that we can get into the shelters as we can. But again, I leave that to you to have that discussion with Catholic Charities on how we are able to make that happen. And I also thank the speakers that are out there doing more things to address this issue. There's a lot of moving parts to this. I appreciate the work that you're doing with the building of the huts. I know that's labor intensive, but thank you for doing your part and your leadership in making that happen. Again, it's not just about the city and the city council addressing this issue. We are moving towards that community issue, and I see a bigger response from our community members in making it happen, so thank you for that as well. And Mr. City Manager, I would encourage us to, if I don't know what kind of coverage we'll get on this, but to issue some kind of a press release announcing this so that if there are others out there that may have an interest in taking advantage of this, that they can explore options for their own facilities and perhaps increase the number of shelters that we do have. So with that, I will move to this resolution. Move a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa issuing regulations under the city's declaration of homeless emergency to provide for immediate implementation of an expanded year-round community homeless assistance program to include safe parking, safe camping, the placement and maintenance of portable toilets, and access to existing bathroom facilities, provision of temporary overnight shelter, and storage for personal belongings, and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. And final comments, council? Any final comments? Good. I just want to offer my thanks as well. During our time in the California League of Cities at the conference down south last week, there were a number of forums that clearly identified Santa Rosa. They didn't talk about Santa Rosa necessarily, but clearly identified Santa Rosa as a leader in a couple of different areas, and this was one of them. There are cities across the state that are both in denial about homelessness and clearly behind the eight ball when it comes to knowing what to do about it or how to move the needle at all. And Santa Rosa, I believe, as they were talking about possible solutions, and without exception, every time they were talking about a possible solution, Santa Rosa was already doing that. So kudos to the staff, kudos to our faith-based community and all those that have been involved in creating this great program, and also to my colleagues for moving this forward. It's just, this conversation would not have gone in this direction a few years ago. And so we have learned a lot, and we're moving forward, and I thank you all. And your votes. And we have 7 ayes. Thank you very much. Mr. Biglin, 14.3.
14.3, report. Plan Bay Area 2040, draft preferred scenario. Lisa Kranz, supervising planner.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As indicated, I am here this evening to talk about the draft preferred scenario, which is going to lead toward a new sustainable community strategy called Plan Bay Area. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of background to indicate that Senate Bill 375 was landmark legislation that was adopted in 2008, which linked land use, transportation, and environmental planning. And the goal of that Senate bill was to reduce motor vehicle trips and resultant greenhouse gas emissions. It requires that each metropolitan planning organization adopt a sustainable community strategy to meet targets for greenhouse gas reductions. And Plan Bay Area is that sustainable community strategy for the Bay Area, and it must indicate how those targets will be met. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, and the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, are responsible for the development of Plan Bay Area. Plan Bay Area 2040 is the second sustainable community strategy that's been developed. The first was adopted in 2013. Hence the name Plan Bay Area 2013. And Plan Bay Area 2040 is a focused update. The plan is to be revised by statute every 4 years. And it's a focused update this time because there is no regional housing needs allocation, which then leads to localities needing to revise their housing elements. So that's not a part of this particular update. We'll see that in the next 4-year update. In initial step, MTC and ABAG tested alternative land use and transportation strategies to analyze their performance-related targets and how they met those. And those alternatives were released this past summer. So there were 3 scenarios that were developed, and they had varying land use patterns, and staff did provide comments that none of those scenarios really reflected Santa Rosa, nor did they match our land use and circulation patterns. So we provided that input. So following that step, then a draft preferred scenario and transportation investment strategy were developed, and that is really our focus today. So this particular preferred scenario utilizes a land use model called Urban Sim, and we've learned through our review of this process that there are some technical accuracy issues with Urban Sim, and it's the first time that MTC has utilized this model as part of this update or as part of the Sustainable Community Strategy development. The preferred scenario was evaluated against performance targets that are related to greenhouse gas reductions, the adequacy of housing, health and equity, and other such targets. And the transportation strategy funds were focused in Plan Bay Area preferred scenario on transit and road maintenance. So the preferred scenario projects the majority of Bay Area household and employment growth in the 3 major cities of San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland, along with some East and West Bay corridors. And Santa Rosa is identified as a key node with about 2% of projected household growth through 2040 reflected in our city. In Santa Rosa, priority development areas, commonly known as PDAs, the preferred scenario projects about 7% more households than our general plan. So it's higher than our adopted planning documents.
Ms. Grants, could you clarify the second bullet point with the 2% number? Just to explain what that means, 2% of projected growth relative to what?
So ABAG and MTC are projecting growth between the years 2010 and 2040 for the 9-county Bay Area region. And of that household growth, 2% of it is allocated to Santa Rosa in this particular scenario.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? Lisa, our population now is somewhere like 6 or 7% of the Bay Area in Sonoma County?
I'm hearing yes back there, so yes.
Okay, so they're actually projecting a smaller proportion of the future growth.
I'm not
here.
sure that that works out exactly that way. I'm going to have to see the numbers to give you a more precise answer.
Okay, thank you.
If I may just ask, my understanding is that this 2% growth is a percentage of the total growth in the Bay Area in all 9 counties, and is not a percentage of planned growth here in some way, but...
It's just a percentage of what's shown in the preferred scenario.
Okay, thank you. So I'm guessing that a lot of growth is shown in San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland.
That's correct. That's just trying to make the point that most of the growth is projected in other areas than in Santa Rosa. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So moving on to the areas outside of priority development areas, the preferred scenario projects about 25% fewer households. So the issue here is more significant than in the priority development areas. The preferred scenario projects employment that is significantly lower than that adopted in the general plan, both in priority developments and outside. And the preferred scenario just basically does not recognize planned residential growth. Outside PDAs, it's a bit high. In PDAs, and employment growth overall is lower than planned. So staff has prepared a letter to MTC and ABAG, which provides basically this feedback on the preferred scenario. It notes differences in household and employment projections from the Santa Rosa General Plan, and suggests that increased employment projections would better recognize Santa Rosa's role as a job center, as well as the large number of residents who live and work in our city, which contribute to reduced vehicle trips and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So with that, it is recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the council provide direction regarding these comments and authorize the mayor to send a letter to MTC and ABAG in that vein.
Thank you, Ms. Kranz. I'm curious, what is our expectation, or what is our hope would be that they would implement our suggestions. What body is going to review the information that we provide and then make a grand decision whether or not to incorporate it in their planning?
The staff at ABAG and MTC will review our comments.
Have they been to date when we have offered comments after they were solicited? Have we been successful in affecting change in their recommendations?
I would say that they do respond positively when you engage and ask for changes, and I think they strive to understand more about our policy documents, but they are also affected by the direction that they've been given in terms of they have control totals for jobs and population and housing for the 9-county Bay region, and they are basically, I don't want to say doling that out, but that's what's coming to mind. They partition that to each county and then each city within that county. So by focusing much of the growth in the 3 largest cities, there is less for the rest of the Bay region in terms of spreading the growth. So that's where they start, and they will take our comments into consideration, I'm sure, but I'm not sure that there will be much movement in terms of where the actual draft plan will be in connection with the preferred scenario.
Thank you. I guess I have to give a certain amount of respect to their crystal ball. Sure, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This is kind of a related question. I know in the staff report, 2 sentences on page 4 where preferred scenario job projections are lower than projected by the general plan. They do not recognize Santa Rosa's role as a job center with a large number of residents who work in the city. So is the strategy to get them to move the needle to recognize what our role is in that? The first step is this letter, having the mayor sign that, or is there another strategy that we can employ to get them to recognize Santa Rosa as a job center?
I think the other strategy is for us to meet more with them on a one-on-one basis and to really look into the urban sim model, because we do understand that there are some technical issues, and I think that there's concern that we're moving forward with that rather quickly without getting rid of or putting more attention on those technical issues. And they're on a time frame. The idea is that the preferred scenario would be adopted by their boards in November, so that leaves us a really short window, about a month or so, to try to work with them to make changes.
Yeah. So again, that's November of 16.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Combs.
Yes, and I will say, as your representative on ABAG, I am speaking up for our city and our county and meeting with staff there regularly on these issues. I think that the creation of the key node concept for our city is in part as a result of the work that our staff has done, that I've done in representing our region to them. The emphasis on our internal commutes and rewarding the fact that we have internal commuting rather than commuting out of county is, I think, also beginning to be heard and influencing. So I think one of the things we need to do is to keep up meeting with them, to keep the process going, the dialogue going. I believe I'm seeing some shifting, but it's hard to tell. And I think that it will be very difficult for them to recognize that we want to fill out our urban growth boundary area rather than build only in PDAs. But I also think that our new reimagining city bus with 15-minute headways is going to get us a long way with them. So that's actually solving a significant problem. I think we talk about that in the future. I requested that they provide us with the parcel data from Urban Sim, because I'm hearing that when you get the parcel data, it's possible to make corrections in what they're projecting. Did we receive, I didn't personally receive the partial data. I asked again for it last Wednesday. So I'm wondering if you received the partial data or not.
Staff from the Sonoma County Transportation Authority did receive that parcel data, and they have really been digging into that. And so I've been talking a lot with them about the work that they are doing, and they've been helping us as well.
Okay, I think I could make sure, I'm going to follow up to make sure that we have it directly also.
Well, I did receive it directly, and our
Oh, good.
GIS folks have it. So
Okay.
we can work on that analysis as well.
I'm really glad to hear it, because I understand, for example, that they show us as having housing in a location where we currently have a high school, and that we simply shouldn't be counting the high school as housing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Council, any other questions before I move to public comment? All right, I only have one card on this item. Thomas Ells.
I am amazed that I'm here for this evening for this. Back in 1998, I was the one with my friend who was a PhD in economics who responded to the RFP for the County Economic Development Board regarding the 2020 plan. And in the process of that, so quickly, what we had recommended was that there be an engineering school, we continue with Smart Train, there be internet training, that became an award, the Chamber of Commerce developed the internet training course. It wasn't about creating the internet, it was about using your business on the internet, and they got an award. But then the last two items were the county, this was a county economic development plan, of which the general plan really is that focus of that, and so that this being new, that it involved planning and economics and environment, the general plan has always been that. It's just trying to tweak people a little bit and remind them that that's what it's all about. And it really is important when we have this general plan update that it involved the housing and what is going to be the housing. But so the last two items that we had in that we were going to analyze were the senior housing, but that housing in Sonoma County should be developed around senior housing because they had the money. And they still have the money to buy stuff, and young people don't have money to buy things. And that the marine sanctuaries off the coast are the most incredible educational opportunity for educational tourism in the world. Those last two had zero impact because the whole plan was stolen and was used by Mark Zandi. And we got an engineering school, and that developed the library at Sonoma State. That was great. But what should we do now? The Southeast Greenway, we just had that meeting. It's the most important thing. It's so valuable, so beautiful that people can have access to Annandale. They can all the way down by Montgomery High School, they can have like a frontage, their property now, like Arizona property that becomes oceanfront when California sinks away, is that panhandle, if you will, gives them frontage on Annandale, which is great. Still need to focus on senior housing. And I would recommend, since there's a little bit of time left, is that, as I mentioned to the economic analysis team for the downtown area, is that there be a combination of what you do is forward and backward analysis through microeconomic analysis and macroeconomic analysis in order to see what's affordable for our housing and our people. And the way you do that is through Leontief matrices. And so there's a guy who did this stuff back in the day for all of the United States, and you can do it locally, Leontief matrices.
Thank you, Mr. Howells. Those are all the cards I have, so we'll bring it back to the council. And Ms. Combs, you have this item.
And I want to thank staff for bringing it forward and for doing the work to get us our voices heard within a somewhat difficult system. The motion is to, 1, provide direction regarding comments to be provided to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Association of Bay Area Governments regarding Plan Bay Area's draft preferred scenario for Santa Rosa. So I'm guessing that means that we move forward the staff suggestions.
There would be a letter that would be transmitted.
And 2, authorize the mayor to sign a letter submitting those comments.
Yes, that is the motion.
That's the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any final comments, council? Your votes, please. And we have 7 ayes. Thank you very much. Mr. McGlynn, 14.4.
Item 14.4, report One Bay Area Grant 2, OBAG 2, proposed projects. Nancy Adams, Transportation Planner, presenting.
Technical challenges at the moment. Oh, here we go. Perfect. Yeah, yes.
All right, good evening, Mayor and council members, and we have a kind of an interesting opportunity tonight. We're going to have we've had a transportation planning, and I'm going to provide the second half of the pairing with the transportation funding conversation. So my colleague Lisa Crayons just presented the transportation and land use plan for the 9-county Bay Area, and I'm going to be talking about the transportation funding that we are trying to maximize all the federal gas tax dollars that come back to Santa Rosa to actually build the transportation improvements. And your role tonight is to provide staff with some direction on what those transportation projects can be that we pursue applications for. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the background, and I'll talk about some of the criteria that we have been using to develop the recommendations, and then we'll get into the projects that we are suggesting that the City Council consider us to pursue. So let's begin. So MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, likes to stay ahead of the federal authorization for transportation. So in November of 2015, they developed the regional policy framework for One Bay Area Grant 2, which is OBAG 2. And then following that, in December, the administration actually approved the Fixing America's Surface Transportation FAST Act. So the Sonoma County Transportation Authority in May of 2016 had an opportunity to review the application and process, and it was approved. Back in July, the MTC had to come back and revise their regional policy to account for 2 things. There were some additional federal transportation dollars that weren't anticipated, and they also had to incorporate some housing programs into their One Bay Area Grant program. So the funding levels that are coming to Sonoma County for this cycle of the transportation dollars amounts to about $20.7 million, and that accounts for the additional revenues that were not anticipated originally. And of that 27 million, about 20.6 million will be available for discretionary competition among the jurisdictions. So the color of money, there are 2 types of money that we actually program for. One is the Surface Transportation Program, kindly known as STP, and that's the money that we typically use for our pavement rehabilitation projects. And the second color of money is congestion mitigation air quality. And that type of money is for projects that reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And usually those are our bicycle and pedestrian projects. So this program will be programming out until 2022. And that's the extent of the federal transportation. And we also need to provide 11.47 match for all of our projects that we submit. So the council, I'm sorry, got ahead of myself. So the schedule for this program is, this is actually going to go back to the Sonoma County Transportation Board in November, and they are expected to do the call for projects, and they're going to incorporate into their application some more of the housing program items that came out of the MTC revision at the regional level.
Ms. Adams, could you, I'm sorry, before you move on, could you clarify the 11.47 match?
Okay, so with our federal dollars, we have to provide, it is required, a match of 11.47, and that's typically non-federal transportation dollars. So in the past, we've used development fees or state transportation funds that are non-federal. So that's part of the requirement for our federal jobs.
11.47.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, and then 88.53 is the federal portion. Sorry,
Okay.
so it's 100%. Sorry.
This is a percentage.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
yes, I'm sorry. So let me see. So let's get back to the schedule. So once the SCTA does their call for projects, we will be required to get our applications in to them probably in January, and then their board will make a recommendation of projects at the countywide level in April of 2017. And then the staff will come back to the council probably late spring or early summer to get an approval of a local resolution of those projects that we're forwarding on to MTC. So expect to see us back with whatever projects make the cut, and we will be asking the council to adopt a resolution at that point. And then in the fall, then MTC will approve the whole region program for OBAG 2. So the council has taken a handful of actions related to this item. So the first one is between 2007 and 2011, the council has supported applications designating the priority development areas, which Elisa Kranz mentioned in her staff report. So we have 5 of them: the downtown area, the North Station area, and the Santa Rosa Avenue, Mendocino, Sebastopol corridor, and most recently the Roseland area specific plan. Next, the council back last year adopted a resolution that Lisa Kranz brought to you regarding our complete streets policy. And then you've also taken some policy actions related to several housing initiatives. The first one was in June. You accepted the housing action plan. And in August and September, you adopted ordinances which initiate some rent stabilization and other tenant protections, including just cause for eviction. And then August of this year, you also declared by resolution a local homeless emergency. So it used to be that the only question you were asked is this project on a federal aid road? And that was it, and you were considered eligible. The times have changed. There's a long list of eligibility and screening criteria, now more related to housing initiatives, and as you can see, looking at our pavement program, and they've added a new one about land surplus requirement, which we aren't needing to do because we're actually a chartered city. So the good news is that the city pretty much meets all of these eligibility criteria, so it's not a challenge for us. And then once we get into the eligibility, through that part of the process, we look at the evaluation criteria. And I'll highlight a few, again, a long list. The priority development areas and communities of concern are very important because those are where they like to get projects in those areas, and they score higher. Our delivery record is very important. We need to be able to demonstrate that we can deliver these federal projects in very tight timeframes. And again, you'll see several housing and health initiatives listed on this list here. So this is a little bit of an interesting map. I'm going to try to highlight, let's see here with my laser. Oops, there we go, yes. There we go. So if you can follow along here, the blue areas are actually the priority development areas, and then the kind of the pinkish areas are communities of concern. And you'll see a diagonal crossing, and those are the areas where they overlap. So following along 101 Spine, and then over here to the North Station area, back down here through the Roseland area, and then back out to 101. So those are areas that are, like I said, projects in those areas score very well in terms of evaluating them for their competitiveness. So now, this part of the presentation, I'll talk about the projects. And the first, it's divided into two areas. Staff looked at the pavement rehabilitation, and then we also looked at our bicycle and pedestrian projects. And so this first set of projects are what staff is recommending the council consider us working on in terms of applications. And then the second set will look at some alternative projects in both of these areas. And then we'll also look at projects that we also considered, but for eligibility or competitiveness reasons, we decided not to pursue. So we use the population share for Santa Rosa just to kind of get a benchmark in terms of what we think we could get back to Santa Rosa, and that's about 34%. And so knowing that, we looked at our first set of projects for maintenance, and there are actually two roadways. The first one is from Hearn Avenue, from Stony Point Road to Dutton Avenue, and that's the blue shaded area. And that actually will maintain existing Class 2 bike lanes. And this project, along with Range Avenue, which is the other roadway, these both will be overlay projects. And there's actually two reaches of Range Avenue. This is the first reach, which is just south of Guerneville Road down to Jennings Avenue, shown in the blue highlighted area. And we can add Class 2 bike lanes to this reach up into Jennings Avenue up north to where the Transit Mall is at Conneetown. And then north of that, there isn't enough width to fit them in. So that is the first reach. And the second reach is a northern reach. And this is, again, on Range Avenue and from Pioneer to Russell Avenue, and we can add Class 2 bike lanes there. So why this is attractive, our overlay projects, is they're all in the PDAs and in communities of concern. They have a pavement index which will score well. And when we add Class 2 bike lanes, that will also add to the scoring of it. And so the cost for this project is $3.6 million, and we would be requesting $3,175,000 for federal, and then $425,000 of a local match. So, another additional thing, when we look at our pavement overlay, we also look at whether it's a transit route and if it's a bike route and our emergency response route, and look at our ADTs. So those are some additional criteria that we look at. So next we'll talk about the pedestrian and bike projects. The first one up is the Highway 101 bicycle and pedestrian bridge. And what we're asking for on this project is money for the design. The council just recently approved a cooperative agreement with Caltrans to start the environmental document. And so the next phase would be the design phase. And so we would be asking for federal money for that. And this project, in addition to the other bicycle and pedestrian project, these are projects that we can deliver. They are well-documented projects with our public outreach, and again, they're both in PDAs and communities of concern. So the next set of projects for our bicycle and pedestrian applications would be, this is some Class 2 bike gap closures throughout the city. And there's, I think, 4 or 5 of those, and then we've got a sidewalk gap closure. And the first one up is Santa Rosa Avenue, and that is from Sonoma Avenue down to Maple. And we would add Class 2 bike lanes and actually pull back the curb on Juilliard Park to retain the parking there on Santa Rosa Avenue. And this is part of the Santa Rosa Corridor Plan. And so that would help further implement that plan that the council adopted. So the next series of projects these are just individual gap closures. First one is on Hopper Avenue between Coffee Lane and Airway. The next one is West 3rd, Stony Point, out west to Britton Lane, and Kiwanis Springs Road from Brookwood up to Sonoma Academy. And then lastly is Piner Road from Marlowe Road to Coffee Lane. And then the sidewalk gap closure, this is on Dutton Avenue on the east side, and actually this connects up to Jennings Avenue, where the recently approved bicycle pedestrian at-grade crossing at Smart Tracks, it would make that connection along with the pedestrian improvements that we're planning for Jennings Avenue. And this project, all the gap closures for the bikes and then the sidewalk gap closure is a little over $1 million, and we would be requesting $930,000 with about a $120,000 match. And one thing, the council, we actually got the Bike Friendly Communities Award last year, and these bike projects will help get us closer to that silver designation. That was one of the metrics that was a part of that suggestion to improve our standing from a bronze to a silver. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the alternate projects, and these are for our pavement. And we actually had 4 projects that we were considering. And so you can see on the screen, there's Hopper Avenue, Cleveland Avenue, and Sonoma Avenue and Farmers Lane. Sonoma Avenue, 2 reaches of Sonoma Avenue. So what staff is going to suggest that council consider to add to our pavement projects is 2 reaches Sonoma Avenue. And that would be from Santa Rosa Avenue to East Street, and then the Farmers Lane to Hammond Drive. And we're suggesting that those be added to our recommended list as alternates for a couple of reasons. One, the geographic equity. We don't have anything currently in our proposed recommended list in the east half of the city. We've got something in the northwest and something in the southwest. So this would balance the equity geographically. And that these 2 projects combined gives us a pretty competitive project. So our overlay project would be about $4.8 million, which we think is a reasonable place to be in terms of the city at the countywide level.
Could you repeat those additions for me again?
So that would be Santa Rosa Avenue from, Sonoma Avenue from Santa Rosa Avenue to East Street. And the second reach would be Sonoma Avenue from Farmers Lane to Hammond, which is the last one on the list. And we broke Santa Rosa Avenue to Bobby Lane down because that's a long stretch, and we were looking at just the cost estimate and really what would be a reasonable place to be. And the Santa Rosa to East Street and Farmers Lane to Hammond is about $1.2 million, those 2 reaches. And that seems like a reasonable addition to the 3.6 that we are already recommending for our overlays. So that puts us at about 4.8.
Because what confuses me, not confuses me, but this Farmers Lane to Hammond Drive is 1 block. What is the cost of that again?
Okay.
Is that because they're going to have to remove a lane and to put in the bike path?
1 second, I can get that answer.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know what the scope of the project would be on that particular reach.
So that reach is about $719,000, and that would be, the treatment would be an overlay treatment. So, and it would maintain the existing Class 2 lanes. It would just be a surface treatment, and that would be about $719,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot it was pavement rehabilitation. It kind of says it right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So for the bicycle and pedestrian projects, we have 2 that we considered as options, and we are going to recommend that City Council consider adding the Piner Road reach. And the reason why we would suggest that they both Santa Rosa or Cleveland Avenue and Piner Road, both of those cost about $360,000 to do that work, and we believe that the Piner Road would provide, if we add it to the other reach of Pioneer Road, which takes it from Marlow to Coffee. So we would essentially have a bike lanes from Marlow all the way to Range Avenue. So that is why we would suggest adding Pioneer Road to the list of recommended projects. We already have a bike lanes on Range Avenue, which is a parallel facility to Cleveland Avenue. So I'm going to move on. All right, so let me, before I get off of that on point, I need to kind of rethink. There's a lot here to go through. So the reason why we are developing alternate lists of projects is because there are opportunities as we get through this application process to, if there's additional money, if folks don't deliver projects, if our bids come in low, we want to make sure that Santa Rosa has the most that we can put into this process initially, because once it gets going, it's all full steam ahead, and if we aren't savvy about how we approach this initially, we may not, we may not be able to maximize the dollars that come back to Santa Rosa. So really, the alternate list is to capture if bids come in low, if projects can't deliver, and there's other federal money that's available that we can take advantage of. And so I think it's a wise move, and we hope that we can take advantage of that. So let's now talk about some projects that we also considered, but for reasons of eligibility or project delivery issues, we are considering at this point not pursuing them. So you'll see 3 pavement projects that you hear a lot about. Pacific Avenue between North and Mendocino, or reconstruct. Colgan Avenue, the same, and Pioneer Road. Those are all major full structural reconstructions, and they actually involve quite a bit of right-of-way, utility upgrades, and a significant amount of environmental review, which really is very difficult to do in such a tight time frame, because they don't allow you a lot of time to deliver. We're actually already behind schedule on the first year of this program, because no one's ready to go. So it makes it a challenge. So for that reason, or for those reasons, we've thought about them, but we are deciding at this point not to pursue those. And there's been quite a bit of conversation about several bicycle projects in the Santa Rosa area. The Southeast Greenway was mentioned here at the council earlier this evening. But generally these projects the first 2 projects are really premature. We're not quite ready to actually pursue any kind of federal activity on them, and they're not in the PDAs, so that's an eligibility issue. And
when you say no one's ready to go, we're not ready to go, or who's not ready to go? On the prior slide.
So, no, the projects are not ready to go. They're premature.
Okay, it was on the prior slide. You mentioned Pioneer Road. You said no one's ready to go. I just was curious as to what that means.
Okay, I guess maybe I didn't say it properly, but I think what I meant to say is that these projects are not ready to go. They're not ready to be delivered with federal dollars. They're better delivered with local dollars, because we can't meet the timelines.
Gotcha. I didn't know what that meant.
Okay, I'm sorry. So let's see. The last one has to do with actually removal of on-street parking, both Middle Rincon Road and San Miguel Avenue. They're in our master plan for having proposed Class 2 bike lanes, but removing on-street parking is very difficult with residents, and so that's a controversy that I think we would have difficulties with. So I wanted to let council know that we actually presented this item to the BPAB in September, and they did support the projects recommended. I must say that between the time that we prepared that staff report and the one that you're seeing this evening, we actually thought a little bit more about the alternate lists, and so they didn't have the benefit of that conversation. But the projects that we are suggesting are consistent with the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, but I wanted council to know that there was a little bit of a nuance on that. But they did support all the projects that staff is recommending. And so I'm going to kind of, we've had a lot of information discussed this evening, and so these last two slides summarize the project. So the first one you're looking at is, what I did was add the proposed recommended projects plus the alternate projects for our pavement rehabilitation projects. So you see the first two up there are Hearn Avenue and Range Avenue, which we spoke about earlier. And the second set of projects, all the alternate segments. And again, you'll see Sonoma Avenue from Santa Rosa Avenue to East Street, and again on Sonoma Avenue from Farmers Lane to Hammond Drive. And that set of projects that you see on your slides, that's about $4.8 million. And then, of course, we'd have to figure the math out for the match, which can be easily done. And then the second slide here recaps the bicycle and pedestrian projects. So again, you'll see the first set is the proposed recommended projects, the Highway 101 design, Santa Rosa Avenue, and through Dutton Avenue are the Class 2 bike lane closures and the sidewalk gap closure. And then the last piece there is the alternate for Class 2 bike lanes. And staff is suggesting the Pioneer Road, as we discussed. And so if you take all those projects, it's about, what did I say? About $3.2 million for our bicycle and pedestrian project. So with that, I'll end with the recommendation, and I'm sure you may have more questions that I'll answer, but we would like, by motion, the council to direct our Public Works Director to submit the grant applications on the city's behalf for a pavement rehabilitation project that we just discussed on 2 slides prior, and then our bicycle and pedestrian projects, which are listed there, the Highway 101 design, and then our bike and ped and sidewalk gap closure projects. So any questions? I'm here.
Sure, Mr. Corsi.
Thanks, Nancy. I look forward to seeing all these get going. You mentioned that the bicycle projects were reviewed by the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And I know that we're using the Community Advisory Board to advise us on our Neighborhood Streets program. Did the timing of this align with that effort in any way? And if not, can we do that in the future?
So yes, we did present the item to our Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board. We have not to date brought this item before CAB. I think that's something that we should think about in the future. I think that there's some merit to that, and it's a good suggestion. And I don't know what their meeting schedule is in terms of, looping back with that group with this call for projects, but something to think about.
Right, and I'm not asking you to go back to the CAB with this right now, but just for future reference. And the other question I have is, I heard you say that among many other things, our adoption of the rent stabilization ordinance and our tenant protections increases our chances of receiving this money. Does that mean that if the effort by the California Apartment Association and others to repeal those, the rent stabilization ordinance and the tenant protections, if they are successful, that reduces our chances of receiving this federal money for these bicycle and pedestrian and pavement projects?
I think that's a great question, and I'm not sure I can answer all of that. So I don't know the answer to that. I think that I'll say one thing, that these these rules are coming to us through the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and I'm not sure how they weave into your comments.
That would be an item we would need to report back to you on, what the impact would be if the referendum were to be successful.
All right. It just seems likely that if having them improves our chances, that not having them would decrease our chances. Thank you.
Other questions, Council? Mr. Wysocki.
Thank you for the report. I, too, look forward to seeing these get underway. And I think my colleague, Mr. Corsi, asked an excellent question. If that could be quantified, you know, I know it's a guess, but that would be very helpful. All of the funding that we're competing for here, that's all current funding. It's exclusive of any potential funding coming from future Congress for congressional action for federal infrastructure.
So, right, this federal funding takes us through fiscal year 21-22, and then at that point, there would be the reauthorization. So it's typically a 6-year time frame.
So it's already in place?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And have we currently fulfilled the matching criteria, or is that expected to be fulfilled?
So as part of the, once we get through the SCTA process and we get a recommended list of projects for the county, which will include the Santa Rosa projects, we will know what those are, and I will come back to the council to bring forth a resolution, and we'll know what the match requirements are, and that's one of the commitments that we have to make as a city, and what the match is, how much it is, and what sources we are identifying to cover those matches.
Would it help if we'd already allocated resources, for instance, to the 101 bike ped overcrossing? We've already spent money on that. We've already spent staff time. Would that be helpful to have in the application now?
So I think it will be helpful to tell the story of the project, but in terms of matching requirement, it has to be things that happen after a certain date, so you can't go back in time to cover your match requirements. It has to be current with the actual ask of the federal money.
Really? So if you're halfway done and you're looking for halfway to finish on any project, you have to have a commitment to go forward. That's interesting. And how much is the design expected to cost? You mentioned it was just design and not construction.
Yes, so we've got an estimate as $1,750,000 for the design total.
And where'd you base that estimate?
That is from our consultant who's been working with us on the project initiation document.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you for the presentation, Nancy. My question was similar to what Councilmember Corsi had about the participation. Just so I'm clear, so we had a participation or a presentation about the CIP projects and street overlays, and we divided it into quadrants, PCI, and then the CAB also had some input. So that was a total different process than what's being presented here today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then maybe this would be more, well, one more question before I make a recommendation. Does public participation in this process, would that greater assist our application?
So that's, if recalling that slide that had all the list of evaluation criteria, public participation is one of the things they look at. Pavement gets to be an interesting conversation because typically jurisdictions will go and refer to their capital improvement program, which is typically how most councils and governmental bodies see and hear about pavement projects. For example, Santa Rosa Corridor Plan and the Highway 101 Bike and Pedestrian Project, those are a little more high profile, and they've actually had dedicated public processes. So to answer your question, I think it's something that we get creative on for the pavement part of it. And I think the good news is that we worked quite a bit with our lab, our materials engineering lab, to help figure out this. And, you know, we'll have to kind of think about, again, looping the CAB in future conversations with when these funding opportunities come back for the city.
We will be including CAB in future conversations around this.
Right, and I would just encourage more than CAB, but I did hear you correctly saying that public participation does enhance our application. I got that?
Yes,
I got
yes.
that right? So then my other, I guess, suggestion would be, I heard you did our presentation was made to the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Board. I really differentiate between participation and participation. In other words, I'm a big believer those that help create tend to support it versus like, I feel we're being presented with this information versus coming up with projects that we'd recommend. So I would just encourage in the future, if we can actually get them in earlier in the process so that when it comes to us, other people have had that input, not just heard the same presentation and said, oh yeah, I support it, because as other council members have said, this looks great, I'd love to see them all done. I just don't know what else was prioritized. So, thank you.
Other questions, council? Okay, I'll move to public comment. Thomas Ells?
Thank you. In just hearing the city's attorney's surmisal of what the effect of the referendum will be on funding, and I'd like to get clarification on that so that we're continuing to proceed from now until we do, assuming that we're going to have an election on the referendum of the rent control, that we always speak of it in the same exact way. So right here, what you say before on 14.1, if I may refer to that from here, because we're talking about as far as funding from this federal funding source, so that we always refer to it in the same way. So if the ordinance is submitted to the voters, the ordinance will not take effect unless and until the voters approve it. So if it is sustained, we're sustaining the ordinance that we created, meaning that there's rent control. And if it fails, then the referendum failed. The referendum effort to repeal the ordinance failed. The referendum, as it goes forward, it succeeds to uphold the ordinance, but the effective reversal of the ordinance fails. So it becomes a bit of semantics, but we should always speak of it the same, so that when it comes to the voting, if we want rent control, it's a yes vote. And if we don't want rent control, it's a no vote, because that was what was going on in the referendum efforts, which were completely illegal, and there were very many of those misdemeanors that were preferred on this community. Every one of them was a misdemeanor. They went to people's individual houses. Forgive me, I don't want to go back to 14.1. I just want to say that we need to say, we should always be consistent that, as I understand it, the referendum will be to uphold the ordinance. If it passes, it upholds the ordinance. And if it fails, it doesn't uphold the ordinance, and we should always speak of that the same, and that wasn't what was said there. What it was said was, if it's sustained, then we wouldn't get the funding. And so, if it's sustained, we would have rent control and we would get the funding. Correct? Oh, that could be a clarification question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ells. And just for clarification, what the city attorney said was, if that were to go forward, she would have to get back to us on the information and what impact that would have on this discussion. She did not offer an answer. She needed to get back to us on that. That was my understanding. So those are all the cards that I have. Bring it back to the council. And any final questions before we move to a motion? Mr. Wysocki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very pleased to bring this forward. Motion to approve the Director of Transportation and Public Works to submit grant applications for the following: 1, pavement rehabilitation program; 2, Highway 101 bicycle and pedestrian bridge design phase; and 3, bike and pedestrian gap closures citywide to the Sonoma County Transportation Authority for consideration in the One Bay Area Grant 2 program.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any final comments, council?
So can I just have clarification? I want to make sure that the motion includes the alternate segments as we discussed for the pavement and
Does your motion include that on there, Mr. Wysocki?
No, but it's as written, and I'm fine going with staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
Including the
Sonoma Avenue
Alternatives.
and the Pioneer.
As listed, alternatives as listed.
Yes, like this, yes.
Okay, yeah, we don't have that any, as far as I know, in our packets or in our screens. So your votes, council. And I have 6 ayes with Councilmember Combs having left the dais. Thank you. Moving on to 14.6.
14.5.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Item
Yes, 14.5.
14.5, report Measure Y. Should the council consider whether to endorse Measure Y, the Sonoma County Library increase of sales tax by 1/8 of a cent, of a percent to maintain, restore, enhance library services? And I believe there's somebody here, although I believe that there's the council, the mayor has afforded both a pro and con opportunity, but I believe what I'm aware of is that David Ebright is here from the Sonoma County Library as the Sonoma County Library Commissioner to talk to the council.
Yes, thank you. David Ebright.
Ebright.
Yes, please, and is there a clicker I can use? You want me to sit down then? Okay, happy to do that. Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, council members. Thank you very much. First, I want to say that it's an honor to be your appointed library commissioner from the city of Santa Rosa, and it's an honor and a privilege to be a library commissioner and support our local libraries. You'll see here on this first slide that libraries do indeed strengthen communities. And I would just like to take that as a given. What I'm here for is that our communities have an opportunity to strengthen our libraries. And that's what I'd like to take just a few moments to talk to you about. Libraries serve everyone in our community. We had lots of interesting issues tonight. Our libraries serve everyone regardless of their housing status, regardless of their income, regardless of their age. Our libraries do, in fact, serve everyone. There is a profound effect on our children, though. We need to have modern libraries for modern children. And it's not just children's programs. Whether it is a program like, you see Charlie Brown there, a Read to a Dog program for reluctant readers. It might be just securing a library card for an adult. I recently attended the 30th anniversary of the adult literacy program at our library. Much of the motivation for the people who are brave enough to say, I cannot read, I cannot write, much of their motivation came from, I need to help my kids with their homework, and I want to do that. So there are profound effects on our children by what happens at our libraries. Broadly, what do our libraries do? Well, they provide us with information, ideas, and they bring us all together to build a stronger community. And that's what I'm here to ask you to do as a council, is to come together and show your support for our public libraries by supporting and endorsing Measure Y. What is Measure Y? Briefly, it is an 1/8 of a cent sales tax. It is a source of funding for our libraries, indeed another source of funding for our libraries. Currently, our libraries are funded about 96% by a single source of funding. We need to broaden that. That single source of funding is property taxes. Looking pretty good now. 4 years ago, not looking so good. We had to close our libraries by 25%. So one of the things Measure Y will do will help restore our library hours. We need a community library that is open on Mondays. We need community libraries that have facilities that are up to date, that don't have leaking roofs. We need libraries that are up to date in terms of technology, so that everyone can be served by what is happening in our community. And indeed, a strong community does have a strong library. And again, what I'm here to ask you tonight is, as a council, to endorse Measure Y, so that we can use some of the strength of the council to help strengthen our libraries and strengthen our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Appreciate that. Would anyone care to address the council with an alternative recommendation? All right, thank you. Council, any questions for Mr. Ebright? Seeing none. Mr. Wysocki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank Dave for your service on the Library Commission. Couldn't agree more with what you just said about what a benefit libraries are for healthy communities. That's why I'm very pleased to have this and very grateful that we are considering this. I just want to emphasize that it's probably the cheapest tax measure. I think it is the cheapest tax measure on the ballot at just 1/8% for 10 years only. So I would hope that we could send a message to our constituents with a unanimous vote to endorse this. So with that, I will introduce a motion to endorse Measure Y on the November 2016 ballot.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second, and your votes, council. And we have 6 ayes. Thank you very much. You have your endorsement. Mr. Ebright, if you could contact me in what form you would like that endorsement.
I'll do that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Now 14.6, Mr. McGlynn.
14.6, report Proposition 52. The initiative's ballot title is State Fees on Hospitals, Federal Medi-Cal Matching Funds, Initiative, Statutory and Constitutional Amendment. Christopher Manson, St. Joseph Health Regional Director, is presenting, I assume, on behalf of the measure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Manson.
Good evening, everybody. I'll be brief. Chris Manson, St. Joseph Health. I was at the last meeting, so I heard a few of the questions that were raised, so I'm going to just try and also proactively maybe address some of those questions, and if you have any others, I'll be happy to answer them. But basically, Proposition 52, where I'm here on behalf of St. Joseph Health, the California Hospital Association, and the Hospital Council of Northern California to ask for your endorsement. Just some background, and I've already mentioned some of this stuff, so I won't go over it a lot. But basically in California, 1 in 3 people in California are Medi-Cal clients. In Sonoma County, that's about 150,000 persons. The state of California ranks at about the bottom of the state. We're either 50th or 49th with regard to Medi-Cal reimbursement for those clients. And so to help address some of that shortfall, again, we're reimbursed at pennies on the dollar for our costs. To address some of that shortfall, in 2009, hospitals got together and decided to go ahead and pass a fee on themselves. There was no state money involved. And what we did with that money is we basically made a deal with the state that we would basically impose a fee on ourselves, call it the hospital fee program. The state then would take that money to the federal government and draw down additional matching dollars that the state was basically leaving at the table. By doing that, we've been able to bring in an additional $3 billion into the state of California. So for for Santa Rosa alone, that's an additional $26 million per year. So we bring in $3 billion. When we first started the program in 2009, the state was getting about $300 to $400 million for basically the sake of administering the program and saying, okay, we'll take this to the feds and bring down some additional match. And we had no problem with that because the money was, everyone remembers what 2009 was like in the budget recession. And so the money's been used by the state to plug gaps in the general fund regarding health and human services related programs. So no qualms, no problems with that. But in order for us to do this program or to make it happen, we've had to go back to the legislature over and over again. When we first did it, we did it for about 18 months. Another time we've done it for a year. Another time we've done it for 3 years. And by going to the legislature, what ends up happening is we end up creating delays in the approval process. So we end up getting paid a year, 18 months in the rears when we go ahead and actually tax ourselves, let the money go up to the feds, and then wait for it to come back. So we create some disruption by going back to the legislature every few years. We've never had a problem. And then also, in addition to that, what we have faced is that $300 million chunk that the states set aside has grown to about $1 billion, or I think it was about $800 million last time. So with this hospital fee, this proposition we'll do, Prop 52, is basically make the program permanent. So we want to go back to the legislature. To give you an idea, last time, though, that we did go back for a one-year term, there was no opposition. In fact, on this proposition, you've got Assemblymember Wood, Chairman of the Health Committee. You've got Assemblymember Mark Levine supporting Senator Mark McGuire. He voted for the last measure. So there's been there's no organized opposition. And so what we're hoping to do is basically create a program that we can rely on and count on in the future, which will basically give hospitals about $2 billion through the patients. If you're serving Medi-Cal patients, this money's going to come through that patient. If you're not serving Medi-Cal patients, you're not going to see a dime. And at the same time, the state's going to basically have $1 billion for nothing. I mean, other than the idea of administering the program. So we think it's a win-win. And again, in Santa Rosa alone, that means $26 million. So to the question about kind of going around the legislature or budgeting by ballot, there is no, just want to make it very clear, there's no state money involved in this program other than the money that we create by going to the feds and bringing it down. The question was raised, or the comment was made about signature gatherers or the law firm, and I guess their relationship to the existing law firm or signature gatherers involved in the petition regarding the rent control ordinance. There's about I think there's like about 6 firms that advise on these ballot measures. And just so happens in 2014, when we started this process, we just so happened to pick one of those 6 firms that, and I don't even know the facts behind it, but I guess have some sort of connection or are the same firm or is advising or something with regard to this current ordinance. So just random luck that we happen to be one of the 6. And then finally, let's see, I think, make sure I got the other questions. Oh, and then why would a city get involved in a proposition at the state level? I think it's an excellent question, and I totally respect that. The only thing I would say is this definitely comes to the city of Santa Rosa. It comes to Sonoma County, where we can quantify. There's $26 million coming. You've got 150,000 Medi-Cal patients within Sonoma County, and that money for those patients to our hospitals means services, service lines, things we do in the community through community benefit programs. So there's definitely a nexus. So I think you could make a pretty strong argument that there's a connection for the city to go ahead and support the proposition. And with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manson. Council, any questions for Mr. Manson? Sure, Ms. Colstrom.
Thank you. Quickly, I just wanted to run back through those numbers. Did you say $26 million for Sonoma County?
26. I think it's about $32 million for Sonoma County. And it's $26 million for the city of Santa Rosa.
And how many Medi-Cal patients in Santa Rosa?
The city numbers I don't have. County numbers is 150,000.
Okay,
so
we're
looking at about $6 million less. So it's going to be some percentage. I don't know if it's 100,000 or
substantial.
Yes.
Substantial numbers of Medi-Cal patients in the city of Santa Rosa.
Yes, as Santa Rosa, I can tell you that, to give you an idea, Santa Rosa Memorial, between 65 and 75% of our patient payer mix is either Medi-Cal or Medicare. And so, Medi-Cal is a significant portion of that payer mix.
So you referenced earlier that Medi-Cal providers are paid pennies on the dollar, and certainly that's a situation I'm aware of. Does this money make you more incentivized to treat those patients?
Well,
to accept more Medi-Cal patients?
Well, it definitely helps. I mean, it definitely helps. I mean, yes. I mean, it definitely helps a hospital that's got a high Medi-Cal population. It's definitely going to help them out. Unfortunately, we're so low on the nationally that we still don't go above that 50-49 number, even with this additional $2 billion, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. But yes, I mean, it's definitely, the money follows the patient. So if you want this additional money, you've got to treat Medi-Cal patients, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Wysocki?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, sir. Just to follow up on that question by my colleague, Legal Women Voters Guide says that this proposition gives $3 billion a year in benefits to hospitals with no oversight or accountability. How would you respond to that? And
Well,
certainly in light with the Medicare patients.
Well, the way the hospitals get the money, it's through serving the Medi-Cal patients. So if we're not serving the Medi-Cal patient, we're not going to see a dime of that money. So there are, for example, there are hospitals that are in this hospital fee program that are winners and that are losers. So there's hospitals that, for example, have very minimal Medi-Cal population, and that basically they're paying a hospital fee and they're not getting money back. But they realize that the state as a whole is better off because the reimbursement level is going up for those Medi-Cal patients. So the oversight, I would say, is if we're not having patients coming through the door, then we're not going to get that additional money. So to Councilmember Carlson's point, I don't want to say we're incentivized, but it does. There is an incentive to make sure that you've got a population that you're serving that's a Medi-Cal, or that you're serving those Medi-Cal patients. And if you're not going to see a dollar of that money.
So would we expect that should this proposition get enacted, that Memorial would be treating more Medi-Cal patients?
Well, you know what it is? We're already, I mean, the reality is that with Memorial or any of our hospitals, we're going to treat them regardless. I mean, the thing goes away tomorrow, we're still going to treat the patients. What you're going to see is you might not see us opening up other service lines. You might see that effect, with our community benefit. We spend money in the community based on a percentage of what our net operating income is. So if that goes down, then we might end up, some of that money will contract because we won't have as much money coming into our hospital. So it's not that we won't see the patients or that we'll see more patients. It'll just make it that we'll be able to serve the patients better, and maybe we can get even further upstream as far as avoiding some of the conditions that create these chronic medical conditions that end up costing even more money down the road. So it allows us to do more things, more than anything.
Any other questions, Council? All right, thank you, Mr. Manson. If there's other questions, we will let you know. I do have a couple of cards for either pro or con for this question. Mr. Buckhorn, followed by Mr. Abram.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Sawyer, council members, and city staff. My name is Jack Buckhorn, and I'm the Executive Director of the North Bay Central Labor Council, AFL-CIO. I'm here to ask for your support of Proposition 52, the Medi-Cal Funding and Accountability Act. Few programs have touched so many or played such an important integral role in the lives of Californians in Medi-Cal. Its roots go back as far as 1933, when the legislature required counties to provide health care services to those less fortunate, including children, seniors, and low-income families. Since 1965, Medi-Cal has been fine-tuned through various federal and state amendments into a social safety net that now serves 13.5 million people, or nearly 1 in every 3 Californians. In November, voters will have a chance to strengthen the Medi-Cal program and its access to providing life-saving health care through the passage of Prop 52. Since 2009, California has received approximately $18 billion in federal matching funds. Those are our tax dollars that are going to Washington and coming back with matching funds. And we use those to pay for these healthcare services for patients enrolled in Medi-Cal. That was made possible through a partnership with the state of California and the state hospitals that was designed to ensure that these federal dollars came back home, that our tax dollars came back home. Those tax dollars help provide services and programs to Californians that were especially needed, especially during the economic downturn. The program has been a win for taxpayers and a win for the state's most vulnerable. That's 6.7 million children, 1.6 million seniors, and 4.5 million working families who are enrolled in Medicare or Medi-Cal. Actually, over 50% of the childbirths in California are covered by Medi-Cal. Over 50% of every childbirths in California. The extra funding derived from this partnership has enabled access to health care for more than 1.7 million Medi-Cal enrollees throughout the entire Bay Area. Passage of Proposition 52 means that there will be no interruption in the flow of federal dollars, ensuring that the partnership that brings vital funds to provide health care services to Californians that rely on Medi-Cal will continue. Proposition 52 eliminates political uncertainty by no longer requiring periodic review or renewal of the program with the legislature. Just as importantly, the measure prohibits diversions of these dollars to pay for anything other than their intended purposes. In 2012, the legislature did just that, diverting nearly $500 million from the program to spend on other services. Proposition 52 also protects taxpayers. We've already heard about that. So I'll just end by saying there's over 1,000 hospitals and others, including healthcare networks, labor, community benefit groups, senior, children organizations, and some really unlikely allies. I mean, the California Labor Fed supports, the California Chamber of Commerce supports, the head of the Republican Party supports, and Republicans and Democrats as well. So this is good policy for California. Let's get our taxpayers' dollars back from Washington, D.C. So I would ask for you to vote to endorse Proposition 52. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckhorn. Mr. Abram?
Good evening. My name is T. Abraham, and I'm with the Hospital Council of Northern and Central California. And I really appreciate you all considering endorsing Proposition 52. And I just wanted to give you a little bit different history, maybe a little broader perspective on it than what Chris and Jack shared. This is a program that has been in place since 2009 and has worked incredibly well. It's only gotten better and better, and what the proposition is trying to do is solidify this program. It's one of those rare ballot initiatives, in fact, I can't think of another one, that has diverse support from over 1,000 individuals and organizations. And when I talk about bipartisan and variety, to give you some idea, both the California Democratic Party, the California Republican Party have both endorsed it. Virtually every hospital and healthcare organization in the state has approved it, including the California Hospital Association, the California Nurses Association, and the California Medical Association. And if you follow healthcare at all, you'll find that those three don't line up very often. And in fact, they're in direct opposition in many cases. This is a place where they're all three in alignment. There's over 100 labor organizations, unions that are behind it. There is no opposition. Every time this has gone to the legislature, it's passed unanimously. While I really wish we had time for me to read the 1,000 on the sheet, if you'd like, I'm willing to leave this. I can leave you. Brought a copy for each of you. You'll just be amazed at who's on here in terms of names and organizations and the diversity. I just don't think you'll see many ballot initiatives that have this kind of support. As Chris mentioned, it has a direct impact on Santa Rosa in terms of bringing money back into the county so that the hospitals can do the kinds of things that they want to continue to do for the Medi-Cal population. So with that, I just respectfully ask that you'll consider it. It would be great to add your list to the name of the 1,000. It's polling well. I think this is something that's good and it needs to be supported, and I hope you join in. So thank you. And I don't know if you're interested in these or not.
You can leave it with the clerk.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are all the cards that I have on this item. Anyone else care to address the council? Seeing.
Good evening, everybody. I do have a comment on this. I was wondering what all these lawyers were waiting for. I recently had a cause to file a complaint against Memorial Hospital. I went in there, and for 5 hours I sat there and received no care. If I could have filed a complaint against Medicare, I would have, but they have no system in place to file a complaint against Medicare. My complaint was that they pay fees submitted by hospitals, no questions asked. Like I said, I went in there directed by the VA. In the first half hour, they drew my blood. In the next 4.5 hours, 2 more people came in to draw blood that weren't even aware that I had even given it. I then had a lady come in, wanted to hook me up to an IV for pain before I had even talked to a doctor. I had a doctor come in the last 15 minutes for 1 minute. Memorial charged Medicare $3,500 for no care provided. Medicare paid a doctor $800. I saw her for 1 minute. After 5 hours, I walked out refusing care, and still Medicare paid that bill to Memorial. There's something wrong when our medical providers pay bills submitted by hospitals, no questions asked. If anybody would have called me and said, do you agree with this $3,500 bill presented by Memorial, I would have said no. I was wondering why all these lawyers were sitting here. Now I know why. I think it's time we start looking at this. It's, they talk about billions of dollars. When I have to think about $1,000, I have to stop back and think about it. And these people are throwing around numbers, billions of dollars. Well, we're the ones who are paying those billions of dollars. And when we have a Medicare system that pays bills from these hospitals, no questions asked, we ought to step back and think about it. Thank you,
Robert. Those are all the cards I have. Again, council, we'll bring it back to the council. Any other questions? Any final questions? All right. Vice Mayor, you have this item.
So I make a motion that this council endorses Proposition 52.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second. Any final comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Sure.
only to offer that Sonoma County and California's foster youth are mandatory participants in the Medi-Cal system. So just food for thought.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Corsi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments made tonight. Mr. Munson, thank you for your comments. It's clear that you were listening, and I appreciate your response. I want to make it clear that my objections to this are not to Medi-Cal, the Medi-Cal program. They're not to treating children or seniors. And I'm not even necessarily opposed or objecting to Proposition 52. I am objecting to us endorsing this measure, and the reasons are the same this week as they were last time. And I don't need to repeat them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corsi. Your votes, council. And I have 4 ayes and 1 no. Councilmember Corsi. Oh, wait. I was going to say, where's my 6th vote? Could you reset that, please? Mr. Oliveris. I don't want to lose another one. And we have 5 ayes and 1 no. Councilmember Corsi voting no. Thank you very much, council. You can add the mayor's name to the list. Thank you. Moving on to, we have no public, yes we do. We have a public hearing. Oh, no public hearing today. All right. Mr. McGlynn, our one and only public hearing this evening.
Item 15.1, public hearing, fiscal year 2016 to 25 short-range transit plan and possible adoption. Yuri Koslin, transportation planner, presenting.
Welcome, Mr. Coslin. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me back. Again, my name is Yuri Koslin, transportation planner from the Transit and Public Works team. This is the short-range transit plan that we presented to Council on September 27th. Council continued the item to today's meeting. Just to review, the SRTP is a required Metropolitan Transit Commission. It's required by the Metropolitan Transit Commission that all transit operators throughout the Bay Area adopt or create an SRTP to receive federal and state funding. We update it every 4 years. It essentially provides a roadmap of our transit priorities. The SRTP is kind of built on top of the work that's already been done around reimagining, so reimagining is incorporated into the SRTP. From the last time we brought this before you, we've updated both the operations and the capital plan. We've improved kind of the focus on the financial plan, improving the layout, and just double checking our data. So I'm going to jump right to the spreadsheet for you. We've included a formula line which details how we came up with the figures and some of the growth assumptions along with those figures. We've tried to differentiate the past accounting for FY14 through 16, and we've updated some of the FY17 budgeted figures based off what was budgeted. And then the FY18 through 25 is the italicized portion of the document. We've included an annual fare box recovery for both the fixed route and the paratransit because that was that's a critical benchmark for us. And we've tried to better define the line items in the operating funding, the operating income, just to improve the transparency there. We've updated FY16 with the most recent information from finance. And again, we've just double checked all of our calculations and assumptions throughout the document and to make the most available, and made changes based on the most available information. Just to run through in further detail, we dropped the FY 12 and 13 as it was not needed, so that's cleaned this sheet up a little bit more. We've detailed where the fare increases are occurring in the fixed as well as in the paratransit section. The fare box recovery percentages that you see there are without the Measure M or the TFCA. That's just strictly money that we take in through the fare box from passengers. And again, throughout the document, we've just detailed exactly what the growth assumptions are. Let's see. I think we've combined I think the TDA is one of the line items that changes throughout, is in both the operations as well as in the capital plan. And we know that based from the MTC that we have a 3.85% increase on that. And so whatever money has been left over from in the operations plan is then carried over to use in the capital plan. I think that's hitting the highlights. I think one other item will be there's the state, you see as line item, state and local funds for FY 14 through 16. And this covers some sales of buses, older buses, as well as some interfund loans that were used to cover the federal money before, as it did not arrive within that fiscal year. And so there were loans within the city. I think that covers the highlights. I'm going to move on, unless there's any questions, to the capital program.
Mr. Corsi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had one question, and this may get you off the hook completely, because there were only two of us with questions on this part last week, and one of them isn't here. But my question had been on, in fiscal year 18-19, it was about the discrepancy between that year and other years in the Measure M operating and Measure M paratransit levels. You've rolled them up into one line on the new spreadsheet, so I'm not seeing that anymore. So I don't have the question on the new one, but I still had the question on the old one. Do you understand what the question was?
Are you asking why are the incomes from FY 15 through 18 changing so much?
This was on table 4.2 two weeks ago.
Right.
So Measure M operating at $350,000 that year, and Measure M paratransit was $469,000. Every other year on this spreadsheet, the bulk of Measure M goes to operating, not paratransit. And so I was just wondering about that one discrepancy.
And I don't have an answer for that. That separation, you have an answer?
Yeah, good evening, council members. Jason Nutt, Director of Transportation and Public Works. So the discrepancy that you saw there, when it comes to Measure M funding, that really is the local funding we use to kind of backfill whichever of the operating systems that needs it the most. And when we ran through the calculations through the fiscal years, for whatever reason, when they set that up, paratransit needed more of it for that 1 year than the other ones did. Realistically, we tried to provide a level of granular detail in the table with the idea that it would improve clarity. It didn't. And so what we've done is we went back and looked at this. We rolled that all up into one because of this exact thing. It will change from year to year. We speculate in the out years as to which project or which operating fund is going to get more Measure M and which one isn't. And realistically, it bounces back and forth throughout the course of time. Measure M is our local money that we use to backfill. And so some days it's going to go one, some days it'll go the other. So that's what you were seeing. It was unfortunately a fairly glaring mark on that particular table. And because of the level of detail, we decided at this point, that's something that we reserve for the budget time, where you get to see the specifics of how we're spending our local money. For this document, just knowing that we have Measure M revenue coming in at this level is really the importance. It's the bottom line, it's the balance sheet at the bottom of the table. That's really what we're trying to accomplish, is so that we're always in the black moving forward. So that was what you saw the last time. We've corrected it and changed it in this particular way. So hopefully that answers your questions a little bit better.
Well, the numbers add up to the one cell this time, so I'll leave it at that.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Corsi. Any other questions, council? Okay.
Just to finish up really quick.
Sure.
We went back through our capital plan again and looked at our numbers to make sure they were right. And there was a couple projects that didn't get added in there, the hybrid engine replacement and some bus stop improvement projects. Finally, it is recommended by the Transportation and Public Works Department that the council by resolution adopt FY 16 through 25 short-range transit plan with which incorporates the adopted Reimagining City Bus Service Plan, updates the 10-year financial plan, and updates the city bus and paratransit service goals, objectives, performance measures, and standards.
Thank you, Mr. Coughlin. Any final questions, council? This is a public hearing. I have 2 cards on this item. I'll open the public hearing. Did Stan take off, Mr. Gow? All right. Thomas Ells.
Well, thank you again, and I haven't looked at the new spreadsheets. I do beg forgiveness in looking at them very quickly that week. I added up those columns, and if you do them too quickly, there's a potential for an error, and I think maybe they were running quickly and they didn't get that the way they wanted it, and this week they put it in the proper cells the way they wanted it, and I myself have to admit that I did not add those up correctly. They did add up correctly. I don't have to stand here and say that and admit that, but I do admit that. And there are 2 kinds of reconciliation. One is the reconciliation of the numbers, and another reconciliation is a great reconciliation of forgiveness, and so we're all offered that, and I would ask that, and also I offer that.
Thank you, Mr. Ells. Those are all the cards I have. You needn't have filled out a card to address the council on this item. Would anyone else care to address the council? Seeing no one rise, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. Any final questions, council? Seeing none, Mr. Corsi, you have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa to adopt the fiscal year 2016 through 2025 short-range transit plan and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. And your votes. And I have 5 ayes, council members Carlstrom and Combs having left the dais. We have no written communications. Any final cards of public comment, Madam City Clerk? Thank you. I think we are adjourned.